Life isn't for everyone, I suppose. Not for a family, anyway. Guess that makes us lucky, huh? What do you mean? He asked. Loners. We don't have to worry about that sort of thing. Nothing between us and our dreams.
Oh, fuck.
It's the sky and the earth. I told him.
This game is fucking...
Martin clenched the wheel a little harder and didn't respond. From what I gathered, I had said the wrong thing. The conversation was over. So for the next 4 hours, we listened to the occasional radio broadcast and followed the charts where the monitor took us. Finally, we reached a stretch of 515, about 5 acres wide, with nothing but green grass and power lines dotted.
Oh,
Right. This should be a good spot, Martin, Mr. Kearney said.
I hate
He
that.
parked a few feet off the road, and then Olivia began to help her father set up a tripod, while Martin checked the cameras.
Fuck.
The sky was so still and quiet.
Sucks. I know.
It's kind of hard to believe we were even tracking anything. In fact, come to think of it, I checked my phone on the way out. I hadn't seen a blip on the Doppler. So,
Japanese dad.
What the hell were we following? While everyone else got to work, I fiddled with the controls to familiarize myself with the van and how to handle it. I wanted to make sure I could switch between the gears and get us going at top speed if necessary. I didn't want to come up short on my first chase.
No?
Popping open the glove compartment, I saw a few straight papers and slid them out to take a look. Insurance and maintenance were pretty common, but there were also quite a few articles on missing persons. I recognized one of the names.
Stuck with no Japanese there.
Nick Sanchez. Is that the Nick that all of them are talking about?
Some Japanese stuff.
Dylan, can you check to see if the feed is still running? Olivia shouted to me, breaking me away from her. I shoved the papers back into the glove compartment and nodded absently to her before giving the thumbs up. When my eyes turned to the horizon, I saw a rumble of lightning ripple across the distant clouds. There she is, Mr. Kearney said excitedly as he adjusted the tripod. Clouds were rolling in fast.
Alpha is online.
And as soon as they crossed a patch of trees, several alarms of the computers began to go off. The lightning began to stop and simmer in the clouds as all of us watched with bated breath. The air itself seemed to change, grow heavy.
3,000 worlds.
A funnel began to form.
I got a
Mr. Kearney shouted excitedly, Martin, start up the camera. I think we should probably get back in the van, Olivia said hesitantly as the sharp bursts of wind grew stronger.
Wherever I
clouds
go,
grew more intense.
Penny, please.
Suddenly, sky and earth met to form a tower of dust and debris on the horizon.
They
Twister was barreling across the farmland. I need to get a good angle, her father insisted as Martin got everything in place.
Alright, Mr. Martin.
Olivia ignored her
my
father and
friend.
pointed towards me. Get ready to go. Don't listen to her, Mr. Kearney barked as the winds nearly pushed the tripod over.
Always on the
The
way.
funnel was right across the road, maybe only 10 miles away. I think I got the signal, Martin shouted.
Come on.
The old man was staring towards the tornado with fierce excitement, waiting another moment until Martin confirmed it and said, Yep, we're locked on, boss. That
Ninjutsu
Fine.
is the ultimate
was all it
weapon.
took for the old man to finally
Fine,
listen
I
to
will
reason
use this thing.
and
I'll
get in
give
the
a shit.
van. Drive through it, Olivia told me as Martin kept himself steady and the back doors open. Keep the speed steady. We can't get too far from it, her father added as I stepped on the gas.
Allow
The
me
massive
to
black and
lead
gray
the
clouds
charge.
swirled and destroyed everything in their path as we made it down the highway.
I'll shield it
Martin
this time
dangling
for some-
halfway out of the back to get the right shot for his boss. Anything? Mr. Kearney
God.
asked. The black man narrowed his eyes and muttered,
protect you.
Too weak. Could be anything. Damn it. Dylan, get us closer.
Time
You're
and
kidding,
time
right?
wait for no one.
Surprised little kids. Already power lines are being snapped up like toothpicks to be pulled into the storm. This is what you signed up for, isn't it? Kearney countered with a wicked laugh as the raging twister filled the air with its roar of devastation. The choice was made for me a second later as some of the power lines fell down on the road, and I yanked the steering wheel hard to turn about. Now we're driving straight towards the funnel. Get in the field, right alongside it, Peter said. Dad, Olivia said in surprise.
Payback time.
Martin, get the guns ready, he said, ignoring her as I picked up speed. We were almost there. I felt my heart beating out of my chest as I pulled the van into the long stretches of farmland, and the trees began to bump
fuck,
wildly.
there's
One little pitfall and we could go
lasagna.
flying. I
And
got
those
it.
who fuck me
We're back in
alive.
business, Martin said excitedly, as another computer screen lit up. The tornado was ripping straight towards our van.
Are you kidding
Over
me?
the hatch, Mr. Kearney ordered. His daughter complied and
Wait,
pushed
if
the
I
roof
lose
of the
two
van open
times,
as he lifted himself up.
I'll
and
use
yelled out,
that.
Give me the gun.
If I use Argus,
Loading the weapon
I'm gonna
and
use
tossing it
that.
up as I clenched the
It is
wheel
better
harder.
to be
Please,
feared
I
than
want to
loved
use
Past the
Argus.
funnel.
if you cannot both.
Steady, Dylan.
I don't give a shit in this game. This game's garbage as fuck.
I must have given them all a look that showed how insane this all was, but I didn't say a word. I just kept driving. Kearney pointed a rifle right towards the tornado as I felt the van bump and nearly lift out of the air. I think we hit something, I said as we kept wobbling on the right side. He was ignoring me.
I do what I want to
On his
do.
face, he fired a shot straight towards the twister. I heard a scream. It sounded like a banshee howling. It was coming from the storm. Give me another. We need to make sure. He snapped, passing the gun back to his cameraman. Martin loaded it up again and then looked towards me as I turned my eyes away from the road. Dylan, watch out! I swerved to avoid a billboard, the van hitting stalks of corn as the tornado ripped the massive metallic structure to shreds. And Mr. Kearney clutched the roof. In those few moments, I lost control of the wheel. The storm was nearly right on top of us. One of the billboard's pylons had come smashing down a few feet from the van as Mr. Kearney climbed back inside and slammed the hatch shut. We need to get out of here. Step on it, Dylan, Olivia shouted. We've already blown a tire. We're so close, her father growled as the screaming grew louder. I can do this. Before we got a chance to object, the back door to the van swung open and flung itself into the storm. It was barely hanging on. Then he raised the gun again and fired another shot. This time, there was no mistaking the shrieks that we heard. A rumble filled the air. I saw streaks of lightning cross the funnel, and something moved from within. What the hell is that? I shouted. Suddenly, more debris began to rain down on us, and Olivia pushed my leg down and muttered, "Drive, goddammit!" The other door on the van was flung open and dangling as well as we made it to the highway. Then, from amid the storm, something spun out and hit the road behind us like a rocket. I need the rope. Martin! Mr. Kearney shouted anxiously. A moment later, the two of them had prepared the harpoon gun, and I watched from the rearview mirror as the thing from the storm began to move. It was about the size of two grown men. Its body was like that of an overgrown toad with its legs twisted backward, and it had two extended arms. They resembled that of a praying mantis. Just as it stood up, I saw from its back long, thin, bony wings extend towards the heaven. Then it shrieked. Started towards the van. Don't stop, Olivia told me as I drove around the downed power lines. The damaged tire caused the van to bump and grind on the road. The creature screamed and flew towards us with lightning speed. Its long claws smashed against the road like boulders, hitting the pavement and knocking up more debris. Martin lifted the heavy harpoon gun and took aim. I need you to keep it straight, he demanded. I clenched the wheel again, doing my best to comply, and sweat rolled down my face. Suddenly, the creature was on the roof of the van, its claws smashing and thrashing at us like we were a tinker toy. I twisted the wheel to try to throw it off, but our tires skidded and our vehicle went spinning. Martin dropped the gun, and the massive flying monster slashed straight into his right shoulder. The cameraman screamed out, and Olivia fumbled to grab the harpoon gun as the creature shrieked and prepared for a second strike. It was all over in a matter of seconds. Olivia fired the weapon straight at the creature's face as Mr. Kearney let out a few rounds. Off of the back of the moving vehicle with a thud. Martin collapsed in pain on the passenger side as Mr. Kearney shouted out a few colorful words of victory. Turn us back around, he ordered. This time I made sure the look I gave him told him I thought he was crazy. But just as I was about to make an objection, I saw the funnel cloud had dissolved.
God damn it, these horses.
The sky was clear.
How?
All that remained was a path of death and a severely wounded monster. I pulled the van up right beside it to get a good look. The thing had skin as gray as the storm. Strange rose teeth where its eyes might have been. It had a face like that of an anglerfish and a disjointed spine that seemed to not be fully formed. It was breathing in and out rapidly, the way any dying animal might. Mr. Kearney hopped out, chuckling to himself softly to grab the other harpoon. Then he slammed the second sharp prong straight into the creature's skull. Once the monster lay still, he looked down towards me and Martin and gave a nod of approval.
No!
Wrap it up, boys.
I got too late.
Time to go home.
I don't have my habits.
By nightfall, we'd made it back to the station on a spare. It was bad enough driving on only 3 good tires and having a monster corpse sticking up the whole van, but on top of that, Martin's injury just seemed to be getting worse with each passing moment. Long, strange streaks of dark gray were spreading across his upper chest. Olivia was monitoring him, keeping a cool rag on top of the wound, as he kept screaming every other minute at the top of his lungs. But you wouldn't know it if you saw Mr. Kearney's face. His features were like those of a man that had just bagged a prize elk on a mighty hunt. I decided once we were settled, it was going to be high time I had a serious talk about all of this. Once a few miles out, Kearney radioed to get a stretcher ready. Natalie and Jim were there at the garage before we even pulled up. Blonde gasped as she saw Martin's injury, rushing to his aid, and Jim moved the stretcher towards the passenger door. That's not for him. Move the bug, Mr. Kearney instructed, kicking open the van door. Jim hesitated for a second, then complied by helping Olivia lift the creature on the stretcher and dragging it towards the lower stairs. Martin nearly collapsed, though, as he got out of the van, and Natalie and I had to use our combined strength to get him inside. I'll take him to the bunker, she offered. I nodded, followed the others up to the control room. 5 minutes later, Mr. Kearney had grabbed a bottle of bourbon from his office and a pack of Marlboros and was insisting we needed to celebrate. When Olivia and I didn't seem to share his enthusiasm, he sighed and pressed one of the intercoms to speak with the doctor downstairs. Is the specimen secure? There was a pause, but then a sharp crackle. As good as it can be. I can start the examination immediately. Good deal. Grab yourself a bite to eat and get to work, Kearney said before popping open the bottle and pouring himself a glass.
No.
Just as he finished, Martin let out another cry of pain that reverberated to the station. And I muttered, maybe the doctor should focus on our living patients first?
Let's go!
You should have a drink and relax, Mr. Pruitt. You owe this victory to your fine skills behind the wheel, the old man said. I appreciate that. Maybe it's time to start talking about the elephant in the room. Olivia took a glass from her father and downed it before remarking, I'm sorry, I thought this was what you signed up for. I slammed my fist down on one of the panels and remarked, I came to chase storms. You never said a thing about going out to bag and tag a damn Jersey Devil. Mr. Kearney chuckled. Settle down, boy. That just makes me more upset. I hopped up and snatched the drink out of his hand, getting right in his face. You're going to tell me exactly what's going on around here. And you're going to tell me now. A crack from a shotgun caused me to jump back as a bullet zipped right through the air and shot between our faces. I looked towards the stairs to see a newcomer standing there wearing a long duster and a low-brimmed hat. The gunslinger swirled his weapon in his right hand and then slung it back onto his belt holster before walking down towards us. Olivia placed her drink down and shouted, Caleb! Thank God you're all right. She ran up to the gunslinger and hugged him. He hugged her back, then marched up towards me, grabbing some cashews out of a little bowl beside me.
You can't even
and crunching on them.
Japanese dad out of nowhere.
Beacon's in place,
I
Margie.
always
Quickly sized me up.
there's much I
Who the hell do you think you are? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
weren't
man,
you listening?
I wanna hear it from you.
Caleb Mitchell. Trapper, hunter, and all-around badass. He paused as he pushed me away from his employer and added,
Oh,
bigger
that's
question
stuck
here
with
is,
bullshit.
who are you? Why is the
and
great
blue.
Paul Kearney putting up with your bullshit? Caleb, this is good. He's our new cameraman, the old man just to me. As the hunter grabbed up another handful of snacks and walked towards the control monitor.
Move on.
He looked at one of the screens where Natalie was getting Martin arrested and listened to the black man scream before chuckling. I swear, I leave you for 5 minutes, whole operation goes to pot. Caleb said. We got one now. Jim started the extraction, Olivia said excitedly. Well, that's the first bit of good news I've heard. He agreed as I crossed my arms and growled.
Oh,
Who is this guy? The hunter cocked his gun and rammed it straight under my Adam's apple. You deaf? He snarled as he backed me up against the wall and added, and let me clarify again with you. I'm the one that has kept these people alive for the past 3 years. You? He gently placed the finger on the trigger as he gave me a glare. You're the one whose head I'll blow off if you ever put a finger on any of them ever again. Be clear? Swallowed hard and muttered, "Here's pistol." Caleb held the weapon against me for a long moment, then laughed before turning towards the Kearneys. Now we got that cleared up. Let's go see the bug, he said, clasping his hands together and moving towards the exit. Olivia and her father followed him at a slower pace, and right before they left the control room, Hunter paused and looked towards me. Dylan, aren't you coming? I nodded, and darted my eyes down to the floor as the three of us followed the newcomer upstairs and into the station's basement. A series of long winding corridors led us to what looked like had once been a maintenance room of some kind, but now, thanks to Jim, it had become a makeshift morgue. The creature lay on the metal slab with its multiple appendages strapped down to the side and a long tube running into its skull. kind you might find oxygen surgery. Jim was just finishing up a couple of lights as he walked in and watched from a small observational ramp. Thanks to the additional illumination, it's clear to see that the place where Jim and Tierney had struck the creature had completely calcified. In fact, most of the gray skin now seemed to have hardened, pointing that only an extremely sharp blade had a chance of penetrating the shell. As if reading my mind, Jim hooked up a bone saw and began to slice the creature's chest. It sounded like a drill smashing into solid earth. Behind us, the door swung open again and Natalie walked in, gripping the metal banister that Jim kept cutting. "How is he?" Olivia whispered to the blonde. "Resting, but in a lot of pain. Anything yet?" He replied.
You know I can hear you, Jim interrupted as he made another incision. Well?
Jim growled. Lasher wiped sweat from his brow and remarked,
Probably go a lot faster without so many prying eyes.
God damn
The
it.
rest of the crew ignored him, though. As Blade hit the strange organic material within the beast. It smelled like dead fish.
A moment later, the blade hit something metallic.
And Jim stopped the saw before turning the table.
Grabbing those inside. The doc ordered, passing the tool to the stout man. Caleb and the rest of us watched as he used the curved metal tool to spread the creature's chest wide open. From under the twisted bones and fatty tissue, something gleamed like a diamond. Jim repositioned the surgical instruments and then carefully extracted what looked like a long
Not counter.
metal
Oh
tube.
my god.
My best companion.
Once out of the creature, he proceeded to grab a few cleaning towels and wipe blood and guts off the discovery.
Oh?
Kearney said again, this time more insistently.
The watched pot never boils,
Lasher quipped, as he sat on a rolling stool and scooted over to a set of computer screens. Grabbing what looked like some sort of extension cable, Jim cleaned it properly as well, and then connected it directly to the side of the metallic object. Immediately, a series of zeros and ones began to appear on the screen.
We're in business,
He said excitedly. Olivia squeezed her father's hand excitedly, but the moment of happiness was short-lived. A second later, a frown crossed Jim's face. Shit, he mumbled as he began to input a long algorithm of code. What? What is it? Olivia said, releasing her father and walking down to the screen to see what he saw. Lasher, what's going on? Kearney asked.
Give me a second.
He said as he typed furiously. But a second later, the screen went black. He said, pushing himself away from the screen in frustration.
Yeah, peace for us.
The air in the room seemed to grow heavy as I watched some type of explanation. It's not a match, Jim muttered as he looked to his boss for an apology. You sure? Kearney asked as he checked the screen himself. Positive. Second I left that cluster, we lost it. Kearney pushed him aside and ran a few numbers himself.
It's never as far
Try it
away
again,
as it seems.
he demanded. Paul, I know my stuff, Jim said with a deep sigh. I waited as they stared down at each other, and finally, Caleb broke the silence by saying, exactly why I told you not to go out without me. Olivia gave him a glare and marched out of the room. Then Natalie grabbed at the bar and muttered, Mr. Kearney, what does that mean for Martin? The old man sighed and looked at her with that look that only meant more bad news. You know what that means, then. She shook and tried her best not to cry. Then she ran out of the room as well. Natalie, I called out. Let her go. Nothing to be done, Caleb advised. I stared at the three remaining members of KTHU and ran my fingers through my hair again before muttering, okay, someone please tell me what's going on. Jim shook his head and muttered, you dense, son. Martin's infected. But we got less than 12 hours. My jaw dropped. I looked towards Kearney for confirmation. The old man simply nodded. Well, we have to do something. Find an antidote for the goddamn things, I insisted. That would be just wasting valuable resources, Caleb pointed out. So what? We just let him die? Is that what happened to Nick, too? I shouted in response. Mr. Kearney let out a long sigh and then turned to Jim and muttered, Lasher, see to it Martin's comfortable. He started hobbling up the stairs to me. I muttered, look, I don't care what your guard dog over there says. I demand an explanation for all of this. Right now. I don't want to tell you again, boy. Caleb said, reaching for his pistol. Mr. Kinney waved his hand dismissively and remarked, No, it's okay. Dylan's right. I do owe him that much, all things considered. Caleb didn't seem to like that, but pushed the door open for his boss and added with an icy glare at me, Fine. But I'll be joining you, so don't even think about losing your temper again. He sighed in relief and responded, It's cool with me. Either way. To be continued. Caleb held the door open once more as he reached Mr. Kearney's office, his steely gaze never wavering. I did my best to ignore it and go inside as Paul placed his crutch down. Then took a seat. He fumbled in his drawer and got his smokes before offering them and turned to Caleb and muttered, If it's all the same to you, I'd like to talk to Mr. Pruitt privately. The hunter narrowed his eyes but didn't dare argue with his employer. Instead, he walked towards the door and said, Fine. And I'll be right outside. Once again, you're alone. Mr. Kearney lit one of the Marlboros, gestured for me to take a seat. I'd like to stand if it's all the same to you. Nerves are pretty much shot, I responded, crossing my arms. Are you second-guessing your decision to join KTHU? He asked. I let out a long sigh. I knew from the moment I got here something was off. This shit... The monsters with us? I want to help. But I can't do that unless someone tells me what the hell this is all about. Kearney let out a laugh. You really are something. Then he looked longingly towards the blacked-out windows of his office. I let the silence linger for a moment and decided to repeat the very same question he had asked me in the morning. What did you lose?
The falling stars brought us here.
I knew the answer. I still wanted to hear it from his own lips.
Hello, my
He let out
friend.
another puff of smoke before responding. My wife. Renee Hollister Kearney.
See value in me?
Almost 30 years for us.
You should.
This time,
Everything engulfed in flames.
what happened to her? To answer that, I'll have to tell you everything I know about the storm. Why it is we do what we do, he answered. Then he proceeded to push aside clutter on his desk and reveal a map of the Tri-County area.
Welcome to the greatest mag show
I
of
clung
all
to every word that
time.
he said. It was 1999 when we first encountered the storm. Olivia was no more than a few years old, still nursing. Back then, we were just like you. Wet behind the ears, searching for a thrill. Storm chasing was Renee's idea, he explained, as he pointed toward a
Hope
red
will
scroll
find a
circle on the
way,
map.
even when all
Found them in the
forlorn.
way by accident. Followed a tip by a fellow tracker that said he'd seen lots of strange storms in this area. When we got here and checked our equipment, we started to think his claims were an over-exaggeration. It wasn't long after that we were proved wrong.
Now
Weather
outshines
around
the
here is
golden
unpredictable because it
crown.
doesn't follow the rules of nature. He paused, staring
Ready,
me down,
go!
adding, As you've seen, something else is at the heart of those storms.
My blood boils until the day I die.
I guessed, to which he nodded absently.
See the mask.
Of course, we didn't know that back then. That first storm nearly killed us.
Wait a second.
We could run from town with barely the clothes on our back. Having an infant only made things worse. These
Still
swords run deep.
Double this.
miles.
Double the speed.
That's how we stumbled upon this place.
Double the
I am
speed.
the
Just
moonlight
about ran
that
from
breaks through the
Scrambled
darkness.
inside.
You should be ashamed for not trusting yourself.
Are you telling me the station was already here? How long has KTHU been here? I asked in surprise. Hard to say, but when we checked the broadcast, last one was from July 12th, 1987. Mr. Kearney said as he lit his next cigarette and scooted his chair over towards a safe hidden behind a bunch of other clutter. He opened it up and tossed me a VHS tape with that date on it. What's this? I asked as I noticed that it didn't have any other markings. That? What has happened to the crew before us? Kearney said as he then gestured towards the old TV set on the wall. I walked over to it and inserted the tape, waiting as the grainy images appeared. Several people were appearing in what looked like closed-circuit network. There wasn't any sound, but it was easy to see what was happening. The stations were invaded by those strange creatures that held human skin over their bodies like a coat. Their eyes were glowing amidst the static as the crew did their best to fight them off. It wasn't enough. One by one, they were picked off to be slaughtered. The maddened creatures ripped them to shreds like paper. It wasn't long until none of them really stayed. The scream was dead.
Same proved true, every last tape we found.
All of them are gone. Kenny told me. And then laughed. What?
I almost forgot. So long. There was one survivor.
Nothing feels
Already
better
met him.
than playing with flames.
I paused and then remembered a few close words spoken to me when I first arrived. Jim? But how? I asked. Kenny shrugged.
Last year was barely cohesive. Spine bruised in 3 places. Babbled like an idiot.
Avoid it.
Took a few
or
days
just
before he finally
undertake.
recovered, and once he did, hardly had any recognition of what had happened. I scratched my head and realized that explained why the whole place had so much wear and tear. So you just decided to take up the call and...
One fatal blow
Do what?
is more than enough.
What exactly does this station do?
I'm sure you must have guessed. You learned pretty quickly that the signal the tower emits causes a paralyzing effect on the creatures that masquerade in this town. Jim knew little else except that the broadcast couldn't be interrupted. Naturally, he wanted to leave. Problem. During the initial attack, Renee was attacked. Jim said it was an infection.
Alone
She wouldn't
is
miss
another
it.
word for splendid.
Do something.
He said solemnly. That's exactly like with Martin. Why didn't you say anything earlier?
Because it wouldn't make a difference. My wife got
There's
lucky
never
because we
a
acted
final
quickly.
mission.
Oh, snapped back. What do you mean that it wouldn't make a difference? Tell that to Martin.
The only way to stave off the infection is by capturing one of those things alive. I swear, we almost lost her anyway.
I don't know myself.
Ian looked away and then muttered,
After that, we discovered the connection between the monsters and the storms. As dangerous as it sounded, we decided to start tracking.
and that's all you know?
One sword.
That's all you need to know.
One spot.
Kearney said firmly. Well, that's not good enough, I growled.
Only thing we can hope for now is that Martin goes peacefully.
The old man declared, darting his eyes away. I slammed my fist down, forcing him to keep his attention on me. You know, I think I figured out the real problem here. And it isn't that there's the monsters that are too dangerous. It's that you've given up the fight before you even started. Because your wife died doesn't mean all hope is lost.
Don't you dare lecture me about things you hardly understand.
Fortune favors the bold.
You've been here 3 days, and this station's been here 30 years.
Not bad.
But those things you couldn't even comprehend.
Kearney snapped back. Caleb was at the door, overhearing the outbursts.
It's another word for
I
splendid.
told you to keep a level head.
Someone warned. Shut the hell up. You're just as bad as him.
I understand what you're trying to do. You want this all to be wrapped up nicely and have a bow on top, but that isn't how the world works.
I shall
Monsters
gain
are not. People
what
die.
I deserve.
Kearney told me, and then sighed and said,
I'm done talking now. Need to rest and recover before the next run.
Fortune favors
I looked at him with
bold.
disbelief. I growled. You haven't answered all my questions yet. Caleb stepped between us, his hand level with his belt as he muttered,
Maybe you didn't hear. Boss said he was done talking.
There's never
I gave them both a stink eye. This isn't over, I added. And then I walked out, frustration and anger filling my every thought. It was sickening to think that they would just let one of their comrades die, or there might be a chance at saving them. I walked to the first floor, pacing back and forth randomly as I tried to think of a solution. I came across a vending machine and used it as an outlet for my feelings, kicking and slamming my fists against the old machine. Take your money too, huh? A voice said to my right, startling me. Both saw that in there. her eyes puffy and red from the tears that she was shedding. Gave her a half-hearted smile. I said, just needed something. She nodded, bumping against the wall and muttering,
I don't mind if I lose.
I nodded,
Great fucking peeve.
standing alongside her.
Yeah, I'm fucking with
How's Martin? Natalie looked away, clearly not wanting to talk about it. You look good. You two are, pretty close, huh? Saved my ass more than once. I just wish... I wish I'd been there. Mr. Kearney says I'm not cut out to be a field agent, but I know that if I had been there, things would have turned out different. I didn't know what to say to make her feel better, so instead I gestured towards the large syringe she was carrying. Yeah. Do you believe this shit's enough to knock down 3 full-grown men?
More than enough.
Jim gave him a dose about 19 minutes ago, and it's hardly even making a dent. Trying her best not to cry, she muttered. And there isn't a bloody thing we can do about it. What Mr. Kearney had told me concerning his wife flickered across the back of my mind. Maybe there is. But as I grabbed the syringe, I said, you said this was strong, right? Like you could knock out an elephant or something?
Nothing feels better than the playing blades.
What if we use this on one of those things? Natalie didn't seem to follow. Face a mix of confusion. Those things can offer an anti-venom for Martin, but only if we bring one back alive. What? How do you know?
I don't know myself.
Her eyes sparkling with excitement and a hint of concern. Kearney, he told me, but he's given up already because he thinks it's too risky. But with this... I paused and I gestured to the drug. We can go into town and...
I kill whoever I want to kill.
Natalie bit her lip. She was excited, but she was also nervous. We can't. I mean, we shouldn't. The boss would kill us if he found out. If we do nothing,
Avoid
we'll
it,
die.
or just undertake it.
She
I
hesitated.
play I'm out because I'm dumbfounded.
At least for another moment, but then nodded to show she was on board with the scheme. All right. How do we do
Alone
this? She asked.
is another word for
The weather band
strength.
still has some weapons for that. If we leave now, we can get back before daybreak, and no one will be the wiser. Natalie was doing her best to contain her excitement. We agreed to meet in the garage in 10 minutes. I went to the break room to gather a few more supplies.
Than playing with blades.
I thought our plan would be foolproof, but we ran into a snag the second we stepped into the garage door. Caleb was standing there, leaning against the van and wiping his hands as he finished refitting new tires onto it.
Not bad.
He tipped his hat up and gave us a long sigh.
No, you're fucked
Something
now.
told me you might try something stupid, Caleb, he said. And then gave a sneer towards the blonde.
Not now, I'm
You,
playing.
Natalie.
Can't do that.
You. I thought you
Can't
knew
do
better.
that.
Don't know myself.
Caleb, we have a plan.
No.
We can save Martin's life. I'm sure you probably think that you do, but
I don't give a shit.
I'm afraid I can't let you leave. It's not safe. You know that, Matt.
What now?
That's my kid. All the distraction. And then I kicked an old oil barrel towards him and shouted, "Run, Natalie!"
I know.
The blonde hesitated for a moment as Caleb jumped out of the way, and then the barrel slammed to the back of the van. Finally, she got up the nerve and dashed to the driver's seat.
One sword.
Aimed for my head as I pulled the passenger door open and told her, "Start the engine!" She glanced into the mirror and revved it up as Caleb bounded towards the van again, but she peeled off before he had the chance. Pressing the button inside the console for the garage door to open, we zoomed out into the dark country road around the station as Caleb was left watching us from the shelter of the darkened parking space.
I shall
God,
redeem
we are so
what
dead later.
I deserve.
11. Not if this works. I countered as we made our way out of the woods
Deal with it.
and onto the road that led to the town. I checked the gear that we have. It's simple. We go in, we grab one of the weirdos, get out. They won't even know we're coming.
I know.
Suddenly, Natalie slammed on her brakes and shrieked, "What the hell?" As I looked out towards the horizon, I saw why she had come to a stop. The townsfolk were standing there, all in a row, just like statues. staring straight towards us. And as we looked about, I realized there were more of them in the tree line ready to pounce. Natalie gritted her teeth. Got any more bright ideas?
Yes, I lost.
There's never a final mission.
There had to be at least 50 of the bizarre people standing in our way as Natalie and I tried to decide what to do next.
We should go back to the station, she muttered. The soft, brisk wind was picking up.
Alone
We can do this.
is another word for
We
splendid.
only need one. I told her as I gestured toward the main thoroughfare and declared, that path should take us straight through the town. The motel has a feed that connects to KTHU. If we can lure one of them there, we'll use the signal to paralyze them.
I shall
It sounds so easy, she said dryly as the group of townsfolk began to advance. We could do this. Just don't stop driving, I told her, as I got one of the guns loaded and added, now watch the back. Natalie gripped the steering wheel a little more firmly as the wind picked up and I heard a crackle of thunder across the sky.
favors the bold.
Another storm was beginning to brew.
We needed to act fast. Shifting back into first gear, the blonde let the tires spin for a second, then accelerated head-on into the line of people. Our speed kept climbing as the line simply stood there, staring oddly at our vehicle like it was something that they had never seen before. Abruptly, the crowd began to move as one, pushing their way towards the weather van with their teeth gnashing. Several of them leapt up nearly 30 feet in the air and landed smack on the van's roof as Natalie plowed into the line. I cocked the rifle and aimed it towards the roof as the ones that had managed to latch on started to try and claw their way inside. I let the first round out, blasting a bullet straight through the old man's skull as he shrieked to claw at me. Then Natalie turned a corner and the next two fell off. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. More townsfolk had gathered as we drove down the main street towards the motel. It actually surprised me to see so many of them there. They all come with a storm? Several skittered across rooftops and buildings, almost like roaches, and I pushed myself up to the roof to take aim and keep the van safe. Reloading the rifle, I fired another shot as one of the jumpers flew across the town square.
Whatever I want.
We're coming up on the motel, Natalie said. There was at least a dozen younger athletic men waiting that stood in our way. A glance at the speedometer told me that we had already reached 55 miles an hour, but the way these newcomers were looking, something told me it wasn't going to be enough. Give it all she's got, I told Natalie, as I fired a shot at the closest male. The bullet didn't even seem to faze him. 75 miles an hour. We slammed hard against the row of dangerous townsfolk, just like they were a brick wall. I fell on the floor of the van, the rifle sliding out to the parking lot. In a matter of seconds, they were on us. One male reached with his muscular arms and tried to pry the back door open as I stood and kicked him off. Then I grabbed the next gun and told Natalie, stay here. I aimed the weapon straight at the next attacker's skull. His brains splashed everywhere as the blonde shouted for me to stay put. Instead, I made a run for it, pushing my way to the motel room that I had stayed in a few nights before. They were right behind me, screeching like banshees and clawing at the ground for any chance to hook me. Seconds later, I turned the TV on and Channel 46 started working its magic. But these things, I don't know why, it didn't seem to work. We were affected by the strong noise, but they kept coming. I fired at the next one, trying to enter the room as Natalie turned the van back around. I only had 6 bullets left. I raised my weapon to fire again, and then heard the most peculiar horn in the world. It sounded like a jingle of some kind. The creatures heard it too, and the group moved to see where it was coming from. A short second later, a long camper trailer smashed into the dozen and crushed them under its wheels. I kept my gun steady as the camper spun its wheel around and knocked out the other stragglers that were thrashing at the hotel windows. Then from the driver's door, a familiar face flashed. Caleb. He hopped out and went to check on the weather van first, grabbing his tow line and muttering under his breath as Natalie tried to apologize.
Swords run
You
deep.
can save it for when we're back at the station. He snarled as he checked the tires and then hooked up the cable. I looked towards the thoroughfare, noticing more of the townsfolk clawing their way out of the abandoned buildings. We should, probably get in the camper, I advised Natalie. A few moments later, the swarm of crazed people were on us, running towards the camper as one. Caleb took out his twin pistols and began to fire as he climbed back into the driver's seat and shouted, "Hold on to something!" The long trailer jerked backwards. A few of the townsfolk bounced off the windshield like bugs as we drove in reverse down the highway. The weather van lurched and moaned against the road as it was dragged down the street. Caleb shouted instructions to us as more of them latched to the side of the trailer, banging repeatedly on the metal. "The signal! Put it to frequency 10!" he shouted. I didn't even hesitate. The piercing sound was enough to knock them all off the camper. And then, as we drove, I saw more of them collapse in a state of shock.
Caleb shouted excitedly and declared, "Take that, you sons of bitches!" I looked towards Natalie and then at the syringe that we had somehow managed to keep hold of. I gave her a look, but before she had a chance to guess what I was thinking, I opened up the side door to the trailer and jumped to the road. I hit the ground running as I heard Caleb shout another colorful expression. Standing right over top of them, I got the syringe ready and plunged it straight into their neck. Caleb swung the camper back around, the broadcast still causing its lulling effect to the others, as the one I had drugged went still. The hell is wrong with you, Pruitt?
It is in despair that I see the fondest hopes.
You can berate me later. Right now, we need to radio Jim and tell him to set up for a transfusion. He said a few more curse words, and then helped me lift the man from the camper and ultimate answer ready and injected it from the other side. You really think that wasn't enough? I said as we drove out of town. Better safe than sorry.
Do you want to make friends with Nana?
We'd made it. Now it was just a matter of getting to Martin in time. Back in the station, I saw Olivia waiting for us as we pulled in, and Nat closed the garage.
Yeah.
She walked over and slapped me across the face. Then she turned toward Caleb and said, "Let's get it on a stretcher." I rubbed my cheek softly and followed behind. She carried the unconscious man in the bunker. Martin's screams of pain filled the air as we got closer. Inside the closed quarters, Lasher was already setting up another IV as we lugged the man on the bed next to Martin. "You already got one," he said, pausing for a moment to marvel at the creature that hid beneath human skin. "Doc, maybe we could speed this up?" I suggested. He nodded and got to work setting up a pick line on the creature's neck. Natalie was biting at her nails as Martin kept screaming. Caleb and Livia
It is better to be feared than loved,
unable to watch.
if you cannot both.
The cameraman writhed and screamed even louder as the transfusion began. A slow drip of the creature's blood pumped into his own.
I, Minotaur, will finish off what was left undone.
Taking her hand and squeezing it as Martin kept begging for death.
An
agonizing 13 minutes later,
in the world!
you could see the first signs of success. The strange dark scars near his wound were clearing up.
But the two
He's calming
greatest
down.
inventions.
The anti-venom inside the creature was doing the trick. Told you. I told you, I said excitedly. And then noticed that Olivia had left the room. Caleb was still there, though, looking no more happy than the minute he had met me.
Yeah, my life sucks.
Congratulations. Looks like you'll live to fight another day, he said, tipping his hat and departing. Is that his way of saying, job well done? It was another 6 before Lasher confirmed it. He's gonna still need some rest, but I think he'll make it, he said. Natalie leapt and cried excitedly, hugging me and then rushing to Martin's side. I smiled, pleased with the good deed. After another moment, let them have their privacy. I wandered the corridors of the station for a moment to find Kearney,
Garbage is fucking appreciated.
rub it in his face that I had proved him wrong. But instead I found myself going to the roof. The darkness was still casting its shadow over all the Emerald Bay, and the storm I had spotted earlier was now getting ready to drop its first bit of rain. The wind picked up, and I looked out towards the city, towards the horizon, still trying to make sense of everything that I had seen. It's coming. Behind me, I heard a lurching noise and turned to see Olivia stepping out of the stairwell to join me. She was smoking one of her father's cigarettes, and her long, dark hair rustled in the wind as we stood
No,
together.
you got that shit.
You did good work out there, Pruitt, she said, looking at me. For a moment, our eyes met, and then she rubbed her neck and complimented her remark. That said, you should know that. Too stubborn to tell me himself, I said. He doesn't want to get a big head, Olivia pointed out. By the sound of things, it's probably too late for that, though. I sighed and remarked, look, I'm sorry about what happened with him, but that's no reason for you to give up on yourself. The soft, admiring gaze quickly turned to one of rage. What do you know about my mother? She asked accusingly. I hesitated, realizing I had struck a nerve, and raised my hands defensively. I know it was hard, what you went through, but all I'm saying is that it may be time for you and your old man to move on, and that's the truth.
Born in darkness.
She dropped the cigarette and pushed herself right up to my face, jabbing a finger to my chest. Don't you ever talk about my mother. And don't presume to know me.
There goes my mirth.
You don't know what the hell I've been through. She smacked me across the cheek again, and then growled, and if I ever Do you say anything about her again? So help me, I'll make sure Caleb blows your head off. She turned away and stood at the opposite corner of the roof as I quickly shuffled my head, embarrassed for using such poor words. As we stood there, the rain began to fall, and she finished her cigarette before remarking, "Don't stay out here much longer, or the storm will fury." I nodded absently, glancing toward the end of the bay again. And something amid the tree line caught my eye. "Olivia?" I said, catching her attention before she went back inside. I think we might have a problem." She walked over to where I stood to get a better look, her eyes widening as she saw the large group of maddened townsfolk bounding through the trees, coming straight for the station.
Bloodshed and
Shit. That was enough to describe our predicament as Olivia bounded down the stairs to the control room. I was right beside her as I heard the sky open up and the rain begin to fall. The last thing I saw was at least 100 of the citizens of Emerald Bay about to hit the station like a flood. Olivia ran through the maze-like corridors towards the bunker, shouting to me to find her father. I made it to the control room, surprised to see Mr. Tierney, who was already there. "Turn the signal on," I told him frantically. He shook his head, glaring at me before gesturing to the system. "One of the generators blew a fuse. We're on recharge." Only a few dim emergency lights came on as he turned his attention to me and growled, "I hope you're happy, Mr. Pruitt. You may have just doomed us all." I didn't say a word as I heard the crowd slam against the station's wall, with their gnashing claws scraping the bare concrete. From behind me, Caleb entered the control room and carried several rifles. He tossed one to Kearney and remarked, "We need to block up the lower corridors. Anything they can use as an entry point. Shut down the other access points to the breaker. We need this place dark. They can't do much in the dark and they'll give us the advantage." Kearney remarked and then gave me one of the guns.
Be ready for my fury.
"Don't think for a second this makes us even. We need all the hands on deck right now," he said as he grabbed his crutch. "What should I do?" I asked, still racked with fear over the incoming onslaught. "Keep the radio on. Listen for our signal. Once the basement breaker is pulled, someone will need to go up to the equipment room and do that one as well," Kearney instructed, following Caleb out. I nervously stood there in the control room, listening as the townsfolk began to climb on top of one another to search for a window. Some of them even managed to reach an arm in through the beat-up windows. I aimed the gun and fired at the first. A shriek of anger reverberated throughout the group. I stood there for at least an hour, watching as the creatures struggled to find a way in. The emergency systems were still allowing me to watch the monitors and see everyone else hard at work. Caleb and Mr. Kearney were on the lower tunnels, using every sort of debris to block the paths that creatures might find as they went. Olivia went in the break room, setting up what appeared to be a trap of some kind. Lasher was grabbing spare boards and reinforcing the windows to keep them from breaking in that way. I froze and scrambled to check the monitors one more time. Where was Natalie? More importantly, where was Martin? And then I caught sight of him, running through the halls toward the garage. Were they making a run for it? I watched breathlessly as the duo arrived at the garage and Natalie went to the weather van, opening the back to haul out one of the crates. C4. I smiled and realized that if anything might stop these beasts, it was that. I pressed on the intercom and shouted, "Natalie, come up to the control room. Bring the goods with you." She seemed surprised to hear my voice over the loudspeaker. They didn't question it. It was 3 minutes later that Caleb and the older Kearney managed to cut the power to the basement. The whole station went dark, and I listened as the storm rattled the building like a cage. A glimmer of light hit my face from above, and I saw Olivia enter the control room carrying a couple of flashlights. "This will have to do the trick until Dad grabs the night gear," she said, tossing me one and then looking up towards the windows where the creatures were almost to the roof. "This is my fault," I muttered, watching the beasts finally reach the roof and listening as they searched for the stairwell. "We can distribute blame later," Olivia said dryly. Another moment later, we heard the shattering of glass above. They were in the building. I holstered the rifle, listening as something got close to the door and aimed. My heart beating out of my chest as it swung open to reveal Martin and Natalie coming in with the C4. "Jesus," I said, letting out a sigh, as the two placed the crate down on top of some of the computer consoles. "Is that really a good idea to have that here?" Olivia said, stepping away from the explosives. "Better than not being here," Martin said as he clenched his side. He still wasn't fully recovered. They're moving across the computer room, Olivia said, as she heard several bits of equipment fall over against one another. The creatures were pushing everything out of the way to get in, to find and kill us. Behind me, the radio crackled to life, making me jump a little. Has anyone gone to the computer room yet? Caleb said in between bits of static. I swallowed hard and looked towards the ceiling where the creatures continued to rattle around, blindly searching for the next exit. There's a bit of a problem, I muttered over the walkie. Well, we're kind of pinned down here. Once that second breaker gets switched off, we can restart the system, Caleb said irritably. Roger that, Olivia said, passing the radio to Natalie, and then taking one of the guns still lying about, along with one of the crates. Come on, Pruitt, she ordered. I nodded dumbly, gripping the rifle and following the stream of light her flashlight cast on the narrow corridor. Above us, every move we made was mimicked by the monsters. Their sounds growing louder as Olivia cocked the gun. We turned the corner. Jim was right there, having successfully barricaded the stairwell.
Oh God, no.
That should hold him, he said triumphantly. But his voice was short-lived as I realized that was exactly where we needed to go. Move aside, Lassiter, we're going through, the younger Kearney demanded. Jim's eyes widened as we heard the shrieks continue. If you go up there, it's suicide, he argued. Dad's downstairs. They got hostiles on all sides. If we don't get the signal up and running, we're dead anyways. She countered and shoved him to C4. We're going up there. If anything besides us comes back, blow him to hell, she growled. Lasher was too awestruck to argue. He made it past the barrier, and I cocked my gun. Olivia listened for a moment as the creature scurried to another part of the room. The breaker's on the left side, right past the fire extinguisher. She paused, reaching for the handle. Ready, Dylan? I nodded, too scared to even say a word. The door popped open, and the two of us walked in with guns at our shoulders. The room was bizarrely quiet. A few gentle noises came from the west, and I shot a flashlight to see if the monsters were coming. They were too smart. They were waiting for us. Come on, Olivia said, keeping our back to the door as we moved up the long stretch between two rows of equipment. And then there was a scream. I cast my light to the ceiling and saw one of the men twist his neck towards me before pouncing down. Kearney shot him the Kingdom Come. But just as his body crumpled to the floor, 3 more men took his place. I pushed back the opposite direction as they crawled towards me, mouths agape and an angry growl resounding throughout the room. Before I knew what was happening, I was firing, picking them off one by one. One of the larger consoles toppled over as we passed by, and Olivia gave a sharp nod towards where the fire extinguisher was hanging. Think you can make it? She said as she quickly reloaded. The blind creatures were scrambling over their fallen comrades, bone and blood splashing everywhere as they tried to attack. I leapt over the fallen console, my eyes set straight on the breaker. 2 more larger women were blocking my path. Their skin was barely clinging to their bodies as they screamed towards me. I lifted my rifle to fire, but another male attacked from behind. He pushed me to the floor, and a long tube-like tongue slid out of his mouth. Another blast ricocheted across his skull, and he toppled over with a scream. As Olivia helped me up, I snagged the extinguisher as I saw more of the creatures moving towards us from the east. Pulling the pin, I aimed for them and fired. The mist spreading out to give us a few more extra moments. The people stopped and shrieked louder, clearly angered by the device. Olivia was almost to the breaker. Then another console toppled over and pinned her down. You hurt? I shouted. Just switch it on and off.
Kill all at
From the
once.
mist came something that made me freeze in my tracks. The people had started to conjoin together and form something that resembled a human ladder. Their mouths were stretching open and gripping the sagging flesh together as a large, fleshy creature skittered over the turned-over console, towering over me like a bear. Several of their arms stretched open the amalgamation of flesh, revealing massive pincers that moved forward to me to crush my body like a twig. I pressed my back against the wall and pulled down on the breaker, knowing that if I died, at least the others would be spared. And then from the darkness came a spark of light.
The Dragonborn is
Something
back!
glimmered in the shadows, and I saw it move straight towards the creature's torso, and then I heard a voice. Get down! I didn't hesitate. I jumped to the floor as the creature let out another cry and then blew up from the inside out, as the innards of the bizarre monster splashed across the stained brick.
I am the moonlight that breaks through the
Figure emerged
darkness.
from the shadows. Jim! Olivia said as she got back to her feet. He looked at the disheveled mess of flesh and muttered, Got tired of waiting. Olivia gave him a laugh and then muttered, We need to get back downstairs.
Sancho,
We went down carefully, listening as the other creatures tried in vain to find another way in. I'll stay behind. Give the word over the intercom and I can throw the switch, Jim told us.
Don't
Kenny's
tell me
daughter
it's gotta be
gave
a
him a
tank.
rifle.
I'll be a fucking
We left the way we
tank.
came in.
Fine,
Once in
I'll
the
be
control
sure.
room, Olivia was able to give the word to radio her dad when we both noticed that Martin was nowhere to be seen. Natalie was in tears, gripping a chair.
Everything
Went down
engulfed in
flight of stairs.
flames.
What's going on?
Do you want to
Where's
make
Martin?
friends with Nana?
As Olivia snatched the radio and called to the basement. Dad, we're ready when you are, she said.
I haven't released Uranus for enough
I focused
time.
my attention on Natalie.
I don't give a shit.
Natalie, look at me. Where is Martin? He said that it wouldn't stop because they were after him. Even with the signal up, he said this was the only way. The blonde girl said.
The night sky tells all.
A second later, Olivia gave the word over the intercom, and we watched as the power came back on. My eyes scrambled to the monitors. I didn't see the camera anywhere inside the building. It was on the roof, I realized. I rushed back to the stairs, calling out to Olivia. Start the broadcast. I'm gonna stop him.
Again?
I don't think I ever ran that fast in my whole life.
What's that again?
The sky was still storming as I reached the exit. I spotted Martin looking towards the edge in a rain smog.
I want to cut.
I moved to leave the stairwell, but one drop of rain nearly caused my arm to swell up.
What?
Martin! I screamed,
Sardines?
desperate to get his attention. He turned towards me, the storm howling louder as the broadcast tower came to life. Channel 46 was back on the air. Get back inside, Pruitt, Martin declared. Not without you, I insisted. I didn't care about the dangerous rain. I stepped out and I cursed solely as the burning storm hit my arms and neck. Damn it, Dylan! Go back! Don't you see this ain't gonna stop? He said. I scrambled to find cover looking over the edge. Most of the townsfolk were paralyzed. But there were a dozen or so larger men that were still trying to reach the station. They want me. I'm a part of it now, he explained softly, as the storm raged on. The hell are you talking about? I screamed. This is how it has to be, Martin said, taking a step towards the precipice. Tell Natalie. I could see his eyes glaze over as he struggled to find the words. Tell her I'm sorry. Martin!
Stop your bastardness!
But it was too late. He went over the edge against the roar.
Alright, show the time.
More thunder.
Show the time.
For the next hour, we hunkered down inside the station and listened as the stronger creatures tore Martin's body apart like it was a chew toy. Kearney insisted we cover the monitors so we didn't have to see the carnage play out. Still, with each passing moment, the rain pelted the building. The wind howled, and then at last, it was over. In the morning light, we gathered to give the cameraman a small vigil. Go out and see if anything was left to bury, but Olivia said it still wasn't safe. So instead, we gathered some of the corpses of our enemies and made a bonfire in the garage. None of the crew really had much to say. It was just a moment of silence. I didn't know him well, but I had to admire and honor his sacrifice. Some of what he said still lingered in my head, and as Jim bandaged the wounds I had gotten on my arm, I reflected on those words.
By accident?
What did he mean when he said he was part of something?
There is no difference.
Lasher gave me a look, but didn't respond. I turned to the others for an answer, and Olivia muttered, he was infected.
No one.
Still didn't answer my question. The signal didn't hurt them either. What was up with that?
Destruction
Time.
is the start of my role.
What? It's distracting me. That's how I cope. I said as I watched Jim finish the last round. Nobody said a word, so I decided to turn the topic back to retrieving his body. It isn't right for us to just leave him out there to rot, I insisted. It's what he would want, Caleb commented. You can turn off the broadcast, Jim.
There is no
Done hunting now. Kearney remarked. What provoked them anyway? Caleb rolled his eyes. Oh, I don't know. How about the fact that you snagged one and then brought it back here? I felt my mouth go dry again and had nothing to say. I had feared that was the case, but I hadn't wanted to be confronted with these facts.
We made it out of town. We were in the clear. So. Told you they would track for miles. Which was more than that, Corey. You took what was theirs. Only acted on instinct to get it back. Fielder Kenny remarked. Natalie was doing her best not to cry. Both of us feeling like fools for endangering everyone with our foolish behavior. What are these things anyway? I said. Kearney sighed into the Marlboro. Think of them like a colony of ants. Bees. They act as one, using frequencies that help them coordinate, strategize, and ultimately attack. Colony. So, the ones we've seen so far, they're the drones? Kearney nodded and gestured towards the dim light peeked through the shattered windows. And the soldiers. Why they aren't harmed by the signals. They're on a different frequency, one we haven't quite figured out how to interfere with yet. You're telling me that this whole time you've been here, you've never dealt with this before? Yeah, you gotta bring all the bad luck, Caleb said. Seriously, though, it can't be a coincidence. The hunter gave a long sigh. Of course it isn't, you dipshit. And if you haven't been so dense to go play the hero, then maybe you could have given us more time to explain the shitstorm you signed up for. I'm not the one who was ready to give up on Martin. I snapped, rising to my feet. I saw Natalie growing more emotional as Caleb snarled. Oh yeah, because great job saving him. A lot of good that did, huh? Sounds to me like you just feel guilty for not doing shit. Caleb bounded across the room, staring me right in the eyes. You know what? You've been nothing but trouble since you got here. Enough! Kearney snapped. The hunter gave me an icy glare and backed down as the older man grabbed his crutch and walked towards the center of the room. Dylan did what any of us would have done, what all of us should have done, he said as he finished his smoke. I gave him a nod. I appreciate that, especially coming from you. Tried your best and you failed. I think the guilt alone will be enough to make you second guess the next time you want to disobey an order. Kearney said evenly. There was another moment of awkward silence. Caleb stood up and stretched and muttered, well, I appreciate that we've all decided to let bygones be bygones. We need to focus on our next step, Beacon. I felt too tired to fight, so instead focused my attention on this turn in the conversation. You mentioned that before. What is it? Caleb looked at me again, clearly not wanting to share anything with me. He gestured to Jim before remarking, the command is designed to explain. Basher smiled nervously, then turned on one of the monitors, displayed a radar of the surrounding area. Okay, so you know how we explained that these things are like bees, right? Well, a while back, Martin and I theorized that maybe if we build a type of transponder, we could mess with their signal, control the way they move. Well, the beacon was exactly that. We built it to send out a matching signal to one that we recorded whenever storms rolled in. And for these past few days, if any indicator, it looks like it's working and the storms are becoming more frequent. Wait, hold on. I don't understand. Are you saying that you actually want the storms to come here? We've been tracking them for years, Pruitt. Monitored their patterns and determined how they operate. The past 4 years, our goals have shifted to one singular objective, Mr. Kearney said. He gave a wicked smirk. Find out where they originate from. Knock out the colony. It took me a moment to process all of what they had just said. When I sat down on the back end of the weather vane. A few things still weren't adding up. Why did we go out and snag one of them? What was that for? The beacon can only transmit one way, Jim explained. When he saw my confused expression, he grabbed some paper and cleared off one of the desks. Okay, so imagine that this coffee cup is us, okay? He said as he grabbed a few other items nearby. Now, this donut here is the transponder, sending out a signal, causing the storm to form one cohesive and predictable pattern. He paused, drawing a ring around the two objects. So in order for us to receive that message, we would need something to coordinate with, which is where the probe came in. Martin sent one out when we were hit by that first storm. The plan was for it to lead us back to the nest, he explained.
I nodded, the pieces starting to form a complete picture, as I stared at the makeshift map that he had made. But the creature died, so we lost the signal. The transmission received, so we couldn't pinpoint where the creatures were coming from. Precisely. Jim said, surprised that I caught on so quickly. I shook my head and looked towards Kearney. How can you even be sure there's a nest? You've been doing this since your daughter was little. What makes you think you even have a chance of stopping it? The old man gave me a stern glare. It was actually Caleb that answered the question. Because if we don't, eventually something will happen to all of us. The way it did to everyone else that found this place. Channel 46 will go dark, and when that happens, the whole world will go to shit. I shook my head in disbelief. You're talking about hunting down a force of nature like it's a wild animal. It just doesn't sound possible. Oh, do you suddenly think you know better? Caleb snarled as he pointed towards Natalie, who was still standing dazed in the corner, and added, "Did I remind you what happened last time you acted on your own? At least I did something. All you care about is this stupid hunt, like you think it's a big game trophy or something." You watch your tone. I'm sorry, does someone have a guilty conscience? That was the last straw for the hunter. He punched me square in the jaw. Before I had a chance to react, he was slamming his foot on my chest. I heard Olivia and Natalie ask him to stop, but Mitchum wasn't listening. His anger towards me had finally reached a boiling point. Then, just as he was about to hit me in the face again, we heard a low growl from outside. Caleb paused. All of us looked towards the covered-up monitors. He's still out there, Natalie said nervously. Move the blankets, Jim. Let's see. Kearney instructed, as Olivia helped me off the ground. All of us watched in stunned silence at one of the exterior monitors. We saw what remained of Martin's body. The drones had torn off both of his arms and devoured the majority of his chest cavity. But most of his face was still hanging on along with other vital organs, just snagging off the side like discarded trash. Natalie held her mouth and screamed softly as we saw something move in the tree line. It was one of the monsters. It had discarded its human flesh and stretched itself to full size, towering over Martin's body like a bear. In another moment, it used its long pincers to drag his body into the woods, leaving the forest floor empty at last. Jim turned to comfort the blonde as she continued to grieve. After another uneasy silence, I asked the question that must have been on everyone's mind. Why would they take his body? Kearney didn't respond, but Caleb was checking the radar again. Flashes of activity could be seen miles north. I think they're taking him to the nest. Let me see, the old man said. His interest suddenly piqued at the possibility that they still had a chance to find whatever prize he sought to claim. Could it be? Could be. It's hard to say. We don't have a good signal here. Too much interference from the tower. But if we got out to this transponder, we could track him easily from there. As long as we didn't lose the signal here, we could triangulate it, then broaden our range. You really think that'll work? Olivia said with surprise. Jim turned his attention to the conversation and ran a few equations before nodding slightly. Possibly. Martin did have a tracker on him when, he must have expected this to happen. I looked towards Natalie, still trying to come to terms with everything, as Caleb set up a plan. We can move all the equipment we need to the camper and use it to head for the beacon, Jim. Jim, you can coordinate from there. Hold on. You're seriously thinking about going out there again? We barely had a chance to even recuperate. If we don't go now, the signal might be lost, and this time for good. We don't know how long that particular beacon will last. Jim, what do you say? Did that work? Caleb asked, turning back to the stout man. Theoretically, yes, he said as the hunter clapped his hands excitedly. But I think I need to be the one out there. I built the beacon, so I'm more familiar with how it works. Okay, sure, fine. You can go, Trapper said dismissively. Hold on, Olivia said, raising her hands and looking towards her father. We need to think this through. Who's staying here to man the station? And more importantly, without Martin, who will handle the camera equipment? The old man pursed his lips together, considering all the alternatives, then muttered, "You'll need to be you, my dear. You're displaced inside and out." Olivia looked like she wanted to object, but didn't say a word about that. Instead, focusing on the issue of equipment. We'll need a driver and someone else to help with the setup. Jim can't handle it all. Kearney looked at me. I knew exactly what he was thinking. I can run the camera. All right, then. Looks like I'm the driver, Caleb said excitedly, getting ready to leave the room. Not so fast, Mr. Kearney declared as he leaned on his crutch and then jabbed a finger towards the hunter. You're a much better gun than anyone else here, Mitchell. That means that you'd be better suited to stay here and protect my daughter in case those things come back for round 2. The trapper looked offended that he wouldn't be able to go. But instead of arguing, he remarked, okay, then who do you suggest as a driver? Kearney looked towards Natalie. The blonde's mouth switched open. Me? You said yourself you wanted to do field duty. It's your chance. I didn't bother putting my 2 cents in. I knew they wouldn't listen anyway. Instead, I turned to Caleb and said, I'll help you load up the camper. Driving out of Emerald Bay the second time for a storm chase felt so much different than before, given all that I now understood. Especially when it came to the people who I now worked with. Natalie was at the wheel, her trim figure looking so minuscule against the bulky frame, and yet I had seen quite recently just what sort of fighter she was. In the back, Jim Lasher was watching the monitors, his eyes dashing back and forth between screens to get a better idea of where we were headed. To think of how many times she had been through this, yet still always wanted more. Then there was Kearney. Paul Kearney was standing up near the very rear of the long camper, starting towards the road that we had been on. He used his door to prop his body up. From this angle, as the sun dipped low again over the horizon, he looked like a captain at the mast of a ship, watching the open ocean as his crew set out for adventure. But this wasn't an ordinary voyage we were embarking on by any means. I was beginning to get the feeling that we were the Pequod, and he was our Captain Ahab. The roads north of Emerald Bay were scarce life or even crops. Just dead earth and scars that ran crisscross, making the whole place look like a barren waste. According to Jim, we still had about 13 miles to go before reaching the beacon. Screens showed the storm was moving to the northwest, lingering near the mountains. Could that be where this supposed nest was that they were so eager to find? I didn't know what to make of any of it. Natalie's tense expression seemed clear. Nervous too. Your first time out here? Asked her as I came back from the minibar, offered her warm coffee. She yawned and took it before saying, no, actually my second. The first didn't go very well. I placed my beverage down in the cup holder, apologizing quickly. Sorry, I didn't know. It was a winter storm. Strong southeast winds moving across the state line that Mr. Kearney wanted to track. I wanted to prove that I was valuable for more than just crunching numbers, she said as she looked into the horizon distantly. I didn't say a word. Listening as she recounted the experience. Back then it was me, Nick, Caleb, and of course the boss. We were in high spirits because Jim had just managed to figure out how to build a probe. It was time to go and test it on a live storm. The radar picked up some fluctuations and we went without hesitation. But it was actually thanks to my astronomy that the probe even worked at all. I worked side by side with Jim. The math was perfect. Everything should have been perfect. I looked towards the road. The realization of what happened dawned on me. Nick died, didn't he? The storm was too strong. Calculations were off. We couldn't stand up against it, Natalie said as she reflected on the event, a blazed look in her eye. Mr. Kearney, he had insisted we push where Martin had been hurt. And now Paul had acted similarly. Was he really so blind to this pursuit that he was willing to risk anything and everything for the sake of the hunt? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up, I admitted. It's right after that Martin and I got close. He told me there was nothing I could have done for Nick. She paused and looked towards me. I guess that's just a forecast for our whole relationship, huh? I leaned over and sipped some of the coffee.
From my last one, I lose, I'll lose.
What made you decide to stay? I guess the mystery of it all. What the storm is. Maybe a part of me wanted to fight back after what happened with Nick. Mostly it was Mr. Kearney, though. He was insistent that my concepts for the probe were spot on. With more work, it could have been perfected. She just
I am me, and always will be.
6 months later, it looks
No
like maybe
matter
you were
what.
right.
If I lose,
She laughed nervously as we kept driving.
Everything
And I glanced backwards to the rear of the camper where our boss stood.
I don't give a fuck.
What do you think is keeping him here then?
My pleasure.
Why is he doing this? Natalie looked me dead in the eye. Isn't it obvious?
My fists are glistening.
Upon the edge of the void.
Realizing she had come to the same conclusion as me. The storm had taken what he cared for most. There's hope that hasn't transformed into blind rage.
Do you want to make friends with Nana?
Neither of us said a word for a long time as we passed the next stretch of road and spotted something off in the distance. I leaned forward, seeing a glint of sunlight reflect off the object, and Natalie remarked, "That's the beacon, I think." I banged on the back of the camper
what I
to
want
attention.
to do.
Kearney and Jim came up front as Natalie slowed the camper down. "Good work. Looks like she's still intact," the old man said. Natalie pulled the camper alongside the highway and turned off the engine, as Jim and I started to gather extension cords to reach the device. "I'm surprised no one bothered out here," I said, as we lugged the long cables over the grass. "Not many people use
Wipe out all the injustice in the
Lots of
world.
ghost towns out here," Jim mused as he opened the paneling on the side of the cylinder and punched in an activation code.
It is better to be
I looked
here
up at
than
barren land,
love.
spotting a few mountains off
If
the
you
south.
cannot both.
But besides that, he was correct. There wasn't a sign of civilization for miles.
Once.
"Come on, work, dagnabbit," Lasher said, smacking the beacon on the side. "Problem?" Kearney asked as he gingerly walked over. "Says it's connected, but I'm not picking up anything. Should be right on top of us, actually," Jim admitted in confusion as he looked up. There wasn't a cloud to be seen. Nothing but clear skies. "You got the coordinates right, and you're
Ready,
patching into home
go!"
base?" "Maybe that's the issue. I need to start running the algorithm for the triangulation," he said, as he rushed back to our vehicle. Kearney was ruffling his hair and looking around. The air was colder, and Natalie hugged at her body.
My blood boils until the day I die.
Lasher made it back to the camper and turned on the equipment there as Paul kept scanning the
I
clouds.
will find a way,
"Hey, Jim,
even when all is forlorn.
bring me a flare gun," he shouted. The stout man was back at the beacon in a heartbeat and passed the flare to his boss. While Jim started working on the code, Kearney grabbed his crutch and moved to the side of the camper. "Natalie, help me to this ladder," he demanded. They watched as the blonde pulled the ladder down and Paul climbed up to the top of the camper. Then, using the roof satellite, he pulled himself up and aimed the flare gun towards the heavens. A second later, he fired and the flare streaked upwards quickly. I watched until it disappeared from sight and frowned. It exploded across the sky, revealing something hidden. The empty sky began to swirl, pushing clouds together into a central mass. Then a streak of lightning burst across the newly formed storm as it kept growing bigger. Jim hit the monitor again and again. "I'm picking up something now, but it's gonna take a minute to transmit." I kept looking at the swirling clouds as they got darker and darker and the wind picked up. "I don't think we've got that long." A low, deep noise boomed from the storm. It sounded like the waking of a mighty beast. Then, as I watched with morbid fascination, the clouds seemed to form the shape of an eye. "I think we need to go," Natalie realized as she saw it. Meanwhile, Paul was smiling. When he noticed our distraction, he called out, "Dylan! Natalie, don't look directly at it!" I rushed up the ladder and shouted back, "Sir, we need to move, and I mean now!" The equipment in the van was already registering wind bursts up to 33 miles an hour. Lightning crashed down, only about 30 feet from the beacon, and Jim held his chest, frightened at the close proximity. He quickly detached a flash drive from the device and rushed to the camper, muttering, "I'll compile it on the road." Paul was climbing down from the roof as the roars from the storm grew louder. Then the funnel began to form. It was larger than before, at least the size of an F3. The camper was rocking before it even touched the ground. "Get in," I said as I helped Mr. Kearney inside. Once the doors were shut, Natalie wasted no time pulling into the driveway. "Dylan, the camera. It's the only way we can monitor that thing without it hurting us," Paul told me. The twister hit the ground on the east side with a reverberating crash. With the speeds rising over 90 miles an hour on the equipment scans, it could easily become an F4. "Shit," Jim muttered as I moved to the rear and got the camera ready. The back of the camper also doubled as the equipment carrier for the heavy camera, so setting it up wasn't difficult even as Natalie picked up speed. I turned the lens towards where we had come from and watched as the massive tornado devastated the flatlands. Things moving pretty fast, I said, watching it rip past us on the horizon. Our equipment now rose to 150 wind speed from this distance. The storm pushed its way past us, striking against a body of water right off the view, and I checked the maps. We need to turn around. Are you crazy? It's intercepting us, I said as the funnel was moving towards a bridge that we would have to cross. We're not gonna make it, Lasher agreed. Natalie pushed the camper to its limits. It wasn't enough. Almost 2,000 yards away, the mighty twister smashed the bridge apart. Nothing. Concrete slabs of pavement flew up into the restless cyclone in a matter of seconds. Natalie slammed on the brakes and turned the wheel as sharp as she could, our tires skidding and avoiding some of the debris as we moved towards the side of the river. I held the camera steadily and heard the storm roar louder as more massive chunks of stone and cement flew past us. One of the windows in the back shattered and our vehicle barely made the U-turn. Somehow, Natalie managed to keep all four wheels from lifting off the ground. Bloody hell, Jim said as he hung on for dear life.
Well, I don't know how to...
Soon we were speeding down the highway in the opposite direction. The storm was not far behind. At this point, our equipment couldn't even register the top speed that it was reaching. It had to be over 200 miles an hour. Kearney quickly scrambled for a map. We need to find shelter, he muttered. From behind us, the inhuman shrieks began to rumble across the sky, and I watched several of the creatures burst out of the tornado and fly across the heavens. The whole sky was alive with the storm's fury as I kept reporting. I briefly glanced away from the lens to get a better look with my own eyes, only to find myself covering them as a direct glance was like staring at the sun. It hurt so much I had to turn away and cuss profusely. It took a few seconds for my eyes to refocus. Nobody ever listens. Paul quipped as our own pedometer reached 77 miles an hour. The thing's catching up, Jim said to our frantic driver. I can't go any faster, Natalie screamed frantically. The storm was almost on top of us. This chase had now become a hunt, and we were the prey. Here, it's an old train yard. They probably have some well-fortified bunkers there. Enough to even withstand this, Kearney said, pressing the map to the dashboard. Natalie's eyes darted back and forth between the chart and the road as she struggled to keep from losing control. Can we make it there? She asked. Before Paul could answer, one of the creatures latched onto the roof of our camper, causing the whole vehicle to shake. Hell, Jim muttered, grabbing the flare gun and then shoving the roof hatch open. He aimed it towards the creature's abdomen and let it rocket straight through the beast. It exploded in fire and the creature shrieked again as it fell, colliding against the side of the camper as he turned a sharp corner onto a dirt road. Dust and more debris kept spinning in the air as the twister took a shortcut, smashing up farmland. I could see the train yard that Paul had mentioned about 13 meters away, but the twister was picking up speed. There was a long stretch of tracks about the road where I saw an old freight train sitting. The cyclone was almost on top of it. Come on. It was too late. I knew it. The train didn't stand a chance. As the massive storm hit it, it was flung like a tinker toy. Natalie swerved right as she saw the metal and gears fly about chaotically. The air pushed around us. The camper crunched as it went over a part of the tracks and into the yard. The train hit the back of our vehicle and sent us up in the air. Natalie lost control. I held my breath and watched as we spun through the air. Equipment crashed down around us. The window shattered. Mr. Kearney bashed his head against one of the counters. Natalie screamed. And then the world went black.
What the fuck's going on? I keep avoiding it. Push.
My swarm has patience.
When I came to, the first thing I heard was the howl of the storm. Wind pressed against my face as I carefully opened my eyes. Then I saw the damage that had been done. We were upside down. Natalie was dangling with her seatbelt on. Glass was scattered all across the roof, along with everything else we had carried with us. Jim was injured but breathing. Blood gushing from his side as he pushed out a piece of shrapnel and checked on his boss. Paul, are you okay? Paul, Lasher said as he checked the old man's pulse and head. He's unconscious, he said. I crawled slowly across the broken glass to where Natalie was at. The whole front window had burst open and more dust and debris was being pushed in towards us by the second. Out across the train yard, I saw the tornado continuing to wreak havoc, smashing up stray train cars and sending them flying in every direction. Besides that, there was the threat of creatures themselves. And while I lay there trying to get my breath back, I counted at least a half dozen. They're skittering along the tops of long metallic trailers, shrieking in the air and searching.
searching for us. You okay? Asked Natalie as she opened her eyes slowly. She muttered as I helped her unbuckle and slowly crawled down to the roof of the camper. We need to get somewhere safe, I told Jim as I scanned the train yard again. How about that? I was pointing towards a large metallic building that looked like it was used as a switch station for some sort of tracks. It's better than nothing, he agreed, as he pushed the heavy equipment out of the way and gently pulled Paul up to a sitting position. Jesus, he's heavy. I don't think I can lift him alone, Jim said. You're also injured, I pointed out as I turned my head towards Natalie and said, think you can help? She nodded and got her breath back, helping pull Kearney toward one of the side doors of the camper and kicking it open. Wind pushed her hair in her face, and Natalie looked towards the twister. Do you think it'll come back for us? She asked nervously as Jim held the door open. If we make a run for it, we might make it, Lasher remarked, crawling out of the door and against the side of the vehicle. Natalie and I were next. Each took hold of one of Paul's arms and dragged him out towards the pavement. The gash in his head looked deep, and I worried that the stress we were putting on our bodies might do even more damage. We had little choice left. Natalie laid him down on the ground to catch her breath, as Jim clutched his side. Then from above us, we heard a low growl. One of the creatures was moving about near the tires, but still spun wildly in the air. Don't move, I whispered as we hunkered against the side of the trailer. If these things were blind, there might be a chance that he wouldn't know we were here. I reasoned as we listened to a claw at the metal underbelly of the camper. Another creature scurried just out of view between two train cars. It made a low howling noise. It sounded like it was a call of some kind. Then the one above us flew off towards the tornado as we watched. Even from this distance, it was hard to look directly at the storm. The blinding light it would cast, causing me to keep my eyes down. Let's go, Natalie said, as she hunched down and placed Paul's arm over her shoulder. I did the same on the opposite side. We lifted up together, his dead weight making it nearly impossible for us to even move at all. Together we moved as one across the train yard. Jim kept his back towards us, held the minuscule flare gun tight in his body. So far, the creatures didn't seem to be paying us any mind. That changed a moment later. Something like a blaring horn sounded out across the sky. The funnel started to push back up, and the creatures made their way into it as it disappeared from sight. And then the rain began to fall. The second it hit my neck with its burning power, I let out a cry and nearly let go of Paul. Shit, Jim shouted as he tried to cover his head and started picking up speed. Then from the downpour came something large. I was having a hard time making sure I didn't tip over on my own feet as Natalie and I followed Lasher towards the master switchboard. But from what I could tell, it was at least 3 times as large as the creatures we had dealt with before. The burning rain was almost enough to make me want to give up, but we finally made it inside the metallic structure. And I laid Paul down, checking him for wounds as well. Shit. How the hell are we going to get out of this? The storm can't last forever, right? I mean, it'll move on, Natalie reasoned. Lasher didn't seem too sure. He was so exhausted that he didn't argue with her. From the entrance, we saw the rain get harder and more intense. The train cars we had just ran past were now barely visible in the downpour. Something else was. It stood above the train cars like a beast out of ancient mythology, slowly prowling the train yard with low guttural sounds. You could barely make out the outline of the beast, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. Then it turned its enormous head towards us, 6 rows of eyes glowing in the rainstorm, and let out a deafening screech. Keep moving, Jim told us, gesturing towards one of the old rail cars. I didn't have to be told twice. Natalie was out of breath and hurting, but she pulled it together to get Mr. Kearney inside the rail car. The creature was moving towards the wide mouth of the structure. I saw long tendrils gaping from its mouth, just as Jim slammed the door shut. Is that going to keep it out? Natalie whimpered as we listened to it move about the station. I listened as it pushed aside train cars with its long legs like nothing. The tiny slots that were cut in the train car, I could see its scaly back looming by. Is it hunting for us?
I don't know.
The rail car jostled for a moment, then shook, and the 3 of us fell to the floor and hunkered down.
Could be.
I'll be honest, at any second. And then after what seemed like an eternity, the creature let out another noise. It pushed its way out of the back. We waited another 3 minutes, and then finally...
I don't really care. I don't give a shit.
Relaxed.
I don't care, man.
I moved to check Jim's wounds, frowning as I realized it was more severe than I realized. You lost a lot of blood, I muttered as I gave my coat to press against his side. I'll be fine, he said, as he slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive. What matters is we keep fish safe. The rain kept pelting against the roof as we stayed there, listening to the creatures search the yard. Finally, Natalie muttered, "How are we gonna get out of here?" Jim was in and out of consciousness from the blood loss, but still trying his best to give us answers. You give my laptop to get patches back to home base and send a message. For help, he said, passing me the flash drive. I can't go out in the storm, I objected. Then added,
Okay,
let's wait and see if it passes, though. I looked down at his wound again and wondered, the way he was bleeding? He would even have that long. He needed medical attention. As he slipped into unconsciousness again, I pushed the rail car door open and climbed out into the station floor. Where are you going? Natalie asked nervously. To find a first aid kit. Keep this door closed until I get back. It was eerily quiet as I moved toward the side of the switch station.
Mage attack?
Nothing besides the sound of the rain and the occasional burst of thunder. What are the creatures doing? Someone just pushed to open the door to an old control room. A few moments later, I found what I was looking for and smashed the glass to reach the kit. There was some gauze, some needles, thread, and a few other tools to help me sew up Jim. Then I froze. Somewhere behind me, I heard the sound of footsteps in the stairwell. I kept the kit close to my body and barely craned my head out to take a look. One of the blind creatures was crawling up the railing, and just as it opened its mouth to smell again, I realized...
Either submit to me or get devoured by the swarm.
I ran faster than I think I ever have. I pushed right past the creature on those split seconds before I had a chance to react, and then leapt down to the station floor. It turned about, made a loud scream, and then jumped towards me. Natalie! I was at least 19 yards from the rail car. The monster was moving faster than an Olympic athlete. I knew it would be on me in a matter of seconds. The door slid open and Jim was standing there, holding the final flare. Get down, boy, he shouted. I dodged out of the way as the creature came barreling. Jim took a step out to fire, but suddenly pain in his side made him triple over. In a second, the creature was on top of him, and the gun fell to the floor with a soft skitter. Rearing its head back, the monster dug its pincers into Jim's chest, slashing open his skin like paper. Lasher screamed and tried to reach for the gun. I was closer. I got up, I grabbed the weapon, I pointed it towards the beast. It fired and hit it in the lower torso, and for a brief moment, it kept ripping into Jim before the flare finally went off. And it fell backwards with the explosion. Shit! I ran to Lasher's side and looked at his new wounds. They were deep. Far too great for me to treat with a mere needle and thread. Natalie panned her head out to look and covered her mouth in shock. Then she crumpled down and began to cry.
30 seconds left.
We're never gonna make it out of here, she said nervously. Jim was gasping for breath. Some of the cuts had hit his lungs. He knew that it wouldn't be long. He grasped my arm and made me look at him in the eye. Dylan, when it happens, make it quick. I stayed by his side as he kept bleeding out, struggling for air. And then he was gone. And the station went quiet once more. Nothing else filled the air except another rumble of thunder. Three hours passed. The storm raged on. Natalie and I moved Jim's body into the rail car where we had decided to wait out the storm. But as we sat there and I looked at the dead man and the unconscious one next to him, I was beginning to think that might not happen at all. Every hour or so, I checked Mr. Cooney's pulse to make sure that he was all right. He seemed to have no major injuries, but after being unconscious for so long, there was no telling what the blow to his head had done.
Well, I don't have my...
I think we need a radio for help, Natalie said after another roar of thunder crashed across the sky. The only way we would be able to was to reach Jim's laptop. That's in the trailer, remember?
I think I have
Those things are gonna find us eventually. You have to do something, she insisted. I know. He said, and trembled as the cold air pushed in again.
I like the story a lot.
It was luck alone that we had kept alive. Revealing ourselves now guaranteed the creatures would react. And there was only one chance to make it out. Fine. Let's do it, I decided as I moved towards Jim's body. Despite the fact that I felt wrong violating a corpse, I knew for us to make it through the rain, we would need cover.
Okay,
The burns we had experienced from the storm already were enough to cause mild scarring on my exposed hands. Any worse, and I wouldn't be fit to help anyone, I thought. I carefully took Jim's coat off and used it to drape over my shoulders. Natalie had a hard time not weeping again as we stared at the man that had tried so hard to save us. "You even think we stand a chance?" she said as I pushed the rail car door open. I didn't bother responding. It'd be pointless to give her false hope. Outside, a crash of thunder made me jump, and I hunkered down near the wide door to stare towards the overturned camper. It's probably only 30 feet away. "I need you to act as lookout," I told Natalie. She nodded and pushed her back against the massive metal door, as I kept Jim's ragged coat wrapped around my head. The wind seemed to pick up the second I stepped out in the torrential storm. It was so hard to even see the area around me, and I kept my eyes straight ahead. Even when I heard another of the beasts howl amidst the thunder, I didn't waver. I found the door we loosened earlier and shimmied inside on my belly. Once inside, I pulled my body up to a crouched position and looked about. Jim's laptop was turned over amidst the other debris. Just as I reached for it, I heard the hiss of a creature from above. I hunkered down again as it clawed at the tires above my head and slowly pulled the laptop over me. I stayed as perfectly still as I could as the creature searched for me. And as I laid there, I felt the temperature change. The rain began to lighten and the sky cleared. Was the storm past? I didn't hear any noises from above, so I decided to take a chance. Crawl back out. A gentle drip of gasoline glistened on the side of the camper. It got a little bit on me as I climbed out and looked up. That's when I realized
Either submit to me or get devoured by the swarm.
a rush of air pushed its way back down to the train yard. I heard Natalie yell in the distance as the funnel hit the ground, flinging debris towards me. I was struck with such force that it knocked me off my feet. I fell right down next to the puddle of gasoline that had formed next to the camper. A crazy idea formed in my head as the tornado moved straight towards me. Getting back to my feet, I moved to the rear of the camper where we packed our auxiliary gear and flung open the door. Another pile of trash collapsed at my feet. I pushed aside the papers and found Mr. Kearney's personal backpack as the storm grew closer. I felt the camper beginning to move, said a prayer. My one shot was about to slip away. At last I found it, Paul's cigarette lighter. Quickly I lit a flame and moved towards the trail of gasoline. I snatched the laptop up and hollered towards the twister. From within its mighty frame, a booming growl came back. The funnel turned towards me, pushed straight towards the camper. I didn't waste another second. I tossed the lighter towards the gas and watched as the flames spread towards the camper. As I ran for cover near some of the scattered debris, the whole vehicle went up in flames. At the same time, the tornado smashed against the hood of the camper, and immediately the flames jumped onto the twister and I heard a howl of pain. It didn't take long before the entire funnel was sucking up the fire and spreading it into the core of the storm. Natalie came running to my side as I stood mesmerized by the tornado. Then, at her urging, we pulled back to the makeshift bunker. A few moments later, the cyclone was completely gone. My crazy plan had somehow managed to hurt the damn thing. I let out a sigh of relief and checked Jim's laptop. Even more excited to see that it had still withstood the whole ordeal. I started up the system as we returned to the rail car. Evening was starting to fall across the land as I finished uploading the flash drive to his program. Son of a bitch, this isn't gonna work, I said as I watched the upload slow down. It's the metal roof. Upsets the signal, Natalie said, grabbing the laptop and gesturing for me to follow out into the open air. About 13 minutes later, I was patched through to the station. Natalie let out a squeal of delight as I sent out our location to Caleb and Olivia. After that, I checked the radar and watched as the storm moved to the northeast. Moving towards the mountains. I realized as I watched its speed increase. Where could it possibly be going? Do you think you actually heard it? Natalie whispered.
Change a thing.
I didn't know what to say to that. It seemed unreal to consider that we even stood a chance against something that powerful. Instead of focusing on that problem, I decided to address it differently. You know a thing or two about astronomy, right? Natalie nodded, but I gestured to the night sky that was forming around us. Maybe I'm seeing things, but does it seem like some of these constellations aren't right?
This is your undoing.
She squinted and looked up. And just as she was about to make a statement, we heard the most bizarre noise come from within our shelter. It was so inhuman that it caused both of us to jump. I turned about, and Natalie said nervously, "Did one of those things stay behind?" "Stay behind me," I ordered. So I moved towards the entrance and found an old steel pipe. And that was when I realized the noise was coming from the same rail car where we had been hiding earlier. "Paul!" I called out and passed the laptop to her, running up to the door of the car. What I saw next defied all explanation. Jim's body was convulsing, twisting on the floor like a rag doll. Something was crawling its way out of his mouth. It resembled this spidery web of slime. And it latched onto his body to cover his face with a coat of brown skin that sealed his dead eyes closed. His legs and arms bent over awkwardly to form a sort of distorted crab-like appearance as I watched. Then the tendrils began to slide their way down his skin, fusing his body parts together to create a tough exoskeleton. All the while, the sounds emanating from his corpse were enough to send a cold chill through my whole body. Behind him, I saw Mr. Tierney stir. It was probably the most inconvenient time for the old man to finally come to, but there was nothing I could do to stop him from seeing what was happening. Paul pushed his body back against the wall of the rail car as Jim continued to twist and reform. His skin and muscle now being stretched to its limits. Mr. Tierney caught sight of me and slowly crawled over to where I was at to help to break free, trying his best to keep his eyes from being distracted by the horrors that were happening to his friend. I didn't hesitate to grab Tierney by the arm and pull him out of the rail car. Then I slammed the door shut and began to jam the metal rod into the handle. Anything to keep this monstrous corpse from breaking free.
Right, I have a shield now.
Natalie was standing close by, listening to the screams that sounded so much like the man she had known for the past 6 months. I helped Tierney get away from the car as Jim's body started to ram against the side, desperate to be out of the confined space. "Help me," I asked Natalie, since the old man didn't have his crutch. In another moment, the latch was free. I couldn't help but look back. The gray matter was forming scales down Jim's legs and chest, long, stretching sinew and sharp bones, pushing out at all angles as the transformation was complete. We all started to run. Out in the open air, I checked the horizon to see if there was anywhere to hide, but most of the other cars had been devastated by the tornado. The creature that had taken control of Jim's body was bounding towards us faster than a cheetah. Then, from somewhere off in the distance, I heard the sound of an engine. We helped Kearney get to the closest overturned trailer to cover, and I spotted a yellow weather van driving up at top speed. "Caleb, Olivia," I realized with excitement rushing over me. The creature was almost on top of us, but they were faster. The van slammed hard against it, sending it flying as it hit their brakes. Caleb jumped out, guns blazing, as he looked towards the monster. "Wait, wait!" Natalie begged him with tears in her eyes as he walked over to the wounded beast.
Ready, go!
It's Jim, she explained.
Yeah, I'm outnumbered.
I could tell the statement shocked Caleb as much as it did us,
my friend.
as he stared down at the dying monster. I thought I saw sadness in the monster's eyes and hesitation. But then the hunter made a decision, pointed his pistol towards its skull and opened fire.
I am the priestess of the
Stop
primal
until his bullets were
lightning,
gone.
the hunter of all the evil
She was at my
gods.
side a moment later, checking her father for injuries.
It is who we
How did you get here so
are.
quickly? I just sent out a signal like an hour ago, I asked. "We were in the area. Sorry, Dad, but I just knew something was wrong when you didn't phone in. You left the station."
I told you.
"Unmanned?"
Yeah.
Her father asked, a panic look in his eyes. "Yes and no.
See
We
value
managed to
in
make a
me?
sort of mobile broadcast
You
for us
should.
while we're out here and about. We followed your directions, picked up Dylan's signal about 19 miles back." Keelan explained.
online.
Kearney still didn't look very happy with either of them. "Isn't safe out here," he muttered. "Yeah, no kidding," Olivia said as she got him up and added, "We need to get you back to the station and recover." "We can't do that, not now," Paul said, looking towards the dead corpse of what was once Jim Lashley.
Sniper ready.
Now that
Give
my
me a
adrenaline
target.
was slowing down, a few stray pieces of this puzzle were being put together. This is never about
You
tracking
should be
someone.
ashamed for not trusting yourself.
"What are you talking about, Pruitt?"
I said,
Caleb muttered.
yeah.
Kearney's face was filled with emotion. "You knew I figured it out.
I do what I
My
want to
mission is to protect lives.
I owe you
Why are
all
you
an
kicking me
explanation."
right now?
When you gaze into the abyss gazes back.
We got
More
out in the open
fighters.
and decided
Fuck
to
this.
take up the conversation on the road north. Paul insisted he would explain everything once we were safe. And after 20 minutes of driving, I decided we had waited long enough. Well, I think this is the rest. It's getting dark. I
I suggested it turned on the road.
I did use Argus.
The storm was hovering over the
My
field.
blood boils until the day I die.
That is the last
A
match.
dozen of those demons could be
Experience the euphony of suffering.
We can keep going.
Feeling interested. I sighed, my patience having grown thin. Look, I've tried to wait. I really have. But this is getting old. Enough is enough. Either you tell me the story, or I'll just come out and say it. I warned. What is he talking about? Natalie asked. Olivia shared a good long glance at her dad before squeezing his hand and saying, "There's no need to hide anything anymore. They've proven themselves more than capable to handle themselves." Paul smiled at his daughter and sighed. The creatures we've encountered so far in this mighty storm, they don't come from out of some hellhole. They come from right here. From people like you and me, Kearney said with a sigh. Natalie shook, the truth hitting her like a ton of bricks. That's what Martin meant, isn't it? He would become part of those things? She said, her voice cracking. The Kearneys held a long, guilty gaze to confirm it. You've questioned everything that I've done since you got here, Kearney pointed out.
I only fight
I looked towards the two people in front who were remaining quiet. You knew about this, didn't you? Caleb and Olivia didn't make a
Don't even
response.
try escaping my sight.
Why would you keep this from us?
Natalie said angrily. Because it makes it easier not knowing. To believe that the people you care about are simply gone altogether is a far better fate than what really happens. Olivia spat. I could hear the frustration and guilt in her voice.
Wanna take a look inside?
Loss. I turned to her father and saw those same feelings in his face as well. Something finally clicked in my head, and I realized the secret they've been keeping from all of us.
Oh, post the greatest
Really
night
happened with you and Edward. Kearney didn't seem to have the strength to respond, but Olivia did.
Let's make this quick.
It was supposed to be an ordinary chase.
Are you kidding me?
We had been traveling across North Kansas, thinking we had been tracking a storm back to its source. I think we probably drove for 6 hours, but still couldn't make heads or tails of the area around us. The storm was affecting everything, and even the spatial reality around us. North, south, east, and west simply didn't exist. It was when my mom came up with a theory.
Greatest sonata.
It sounds
with
cheesy,
your
but
corpse.
she said that we weren't in Kansas anymore.
My crescendo bullet.
Olivia paused and looked towards the rolling landscape around us. We had gone inside the storm. Treated us like we were insects trapped inside a spider's web. Paul spat. As if in response, we heard the storm rumble across the sky again. What happened next? Renee came up with a plan to push our way out.
Oh my god, I don't have a second body.
But we didn't know what else
Let's make
to do.
this quick.
We set up charges near to what we believed were the edge of the storm. We thought if we just heard it, it would let us leave.
You're
Instead, the storm pushed back.
Music to my
Hundreds of
ears.
drones swarmed from the sky, ready to tear us limb from limb. But even when the situation seemed impossible, my mom didn't give up. Olivia added. She sacrificed herself. Found a way to push one last time. Knew that it'd only work one time.
Don't even try.
They watched as she was taken right.
Behold, my crescendo bullet.
The storm fell away, but the aftermath
Wanna take a
lasted
look
lifetime.
inside?
My wife was taken from me, changed into one of those beasts against her will. Paul admitted. Caleb had slowed down the van.
I only fight
We were almost at the mountains. I crossed my arms,
No
contemplating
one
everything that the
else.
Kearneys had just told us. There was a lot to take in. That's why you've been trying to find this
You're dead.
particular storm, isn't it?
Music to my ears.
If your wife's inside? Paul nodded, too exhausted to hide anything else. How can you be sure that she's
Let's
still
make
alive?
this quick.
Olivia bit her bottom lip. Every storm has particular patterns. We follow the pattern. But her voice showed a hint of doubt. And that told me all I needed to know.
I'll post the greatest
Don't
knot with your corpse.
And dragged us here to do what? To save her? Put her out of her misery.
Don't
Even those words seemed to take his daughter by surprise. Years ago, I might have thought differently. They could work some miracle to change what happened.
Your
The facts are clearer than ever now.
to my ears.
My wife died that day, and the storm took away whatever was left. Since then, all that she has been is a puppet on a
Want to take a
string.
look inside?
Her and every other person that this damn thing took from us. Paul said as he took his daughter and tried to comfort her. But Olivia pulled away. The face told me everything I needed to know.
Post the greatest knot
said-
with your corpse.
You would never give up on her, he said angrily. I haven't.
Let's make this quick.
Is the only way. Only way for her to finally be free, Garena declared. Olivia shook her head as Caleb stopped the car. She jumped out, her eyes filled with tears. Natalie wrapped her arms around herself and shivered again.
No
Even
one
despite
else.
all of these revelations, I still had my doubts about Paul's plan. You don't stand a chance of destroying this thing. The odds are stacked against us. This is like going up against a god. You saw what happened to the camper? To Jim? We nearly all suffered the same fate. Paul shook his head.
Post the
You hurt the
greatest
monster
knot
already,
with
Dylan.
your corpse.
When I heard what you did to that thing, you restored faith in this plan. I know now we can make it. We can
Don't
throw the
even
nest
try
back to
to
whatever
save
hell
my
it came
son.
from. He decided firmly. I couldn't help but to show the same disgust as Olivia. But my reasons were because I had common sense. Even Natalie was getting upset. You still haven't changed since the day we've met. You're so blinded by revenge that you don't care about anyone else.
Behold.
Oh, you put on a good show. But you don't care about what happened to Jim, or to Martin, or to Nick, or any of the other people that have blindly followed you. She screamed.
I only
That isn't true,
myself.
Jimmy said in
No
defense.
one
It
else.
was only half-hearted. Her words had cut him to the core. It was too late. I saw him for the
Want to
broken
take a
man
look
that he was.
inside?
He would pursue this course to the grave to get his revenge. I need a smoke, I said, stepping out into the open air.
I am fighting.
It was almost midnight. The only light in the sky coming from the terribly dangerous clouds. Olivia was standing out in the nearby field, staring up at the stars. In the distance, we heard the storm continuing to rumble.
I'll post
She wiped away
the
tears
greatest
and
knot
anger.
with your corpse.
Some team we are, huh? No communication at all. We're no team at all. She laughed. I shrugged and I lit a smoke as she said, "You must think that I'm a damn fool for believing that lie for so long." Not stupid to have hope, I replied, as he passed a cigarette to me. Even false hope? God.
Let's
How could I have
make
been
this
so
quick.
stupid? Well, there at the end, before Caleb killed the monster, I saw some part of Jim still inside him. Like, he was ready to die. But he didn't want to hurt us. See, before true. I know these things can still have some bits of humanity in there, Jim insisted. I looked back towards the camper.
Don't even try escaping my
Your
son.
dad isn't going to stop until you find the nest. What are you going to do once we get there? We have to do everything in our power to save those people trapped inside. Maybe that really does mean destroying it, though, she said with a sigh. I frowned. Crazy idea running through my mind.
Post the greatest knot with your
Maybe we can do both. Olivia tossed the cigarette away. What do you mean? She asked. Well, the nest is like a control tower, right? That's where the primary signal that controls them comes from. So we just have to interpret that broadcast and replace it with our own. Her eyes sparkled with that same spirit I had seen when we first met. She was ready to give it a try. Don't tell Dad, she declared, just as I was about to return to the van. You think he'll try to stop us? He's had one mission since the day that we lost Mom. Nothing we say will change that, Dylan. You have to keep him thinking we're all in agreement. looked frustrated that she would have to tell us a lie.
So
I knew she was right.
no one else.
No, but if it works, then we can save at least some of those poor people. Then it has to count for something, doesn't it?
Want to take a look inside?
I told her it did. As we moved back to the weather van, we both saw someone standing there near the driver's door. Caleb. You were listening? I asked. It's my job to watch out for y'all, Mitchum said with a shrug as he stretched his legs. Go tell the old man we'll get back on the road in a tick. We gotta go piss. He added, walking away from the van. Olivia got into the back of the vehicle as I followed Caleb. Coming to watch, Pruitt? Look, I know we've butted heads before, but if her plan is going to work, we have to work together, I told him evenly. Pretty crazy idea you had there. No, to interrupt the nest signal? He muttered as a gust of wind blew through the nearby tree line. Do you really think it'll work? Mitchum asked as he zipped up his pants. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure about any of this anymore, I admitted. Not a good idea to get her hopes up like that if you're 100% sure.
Want to take a look
Make things worse in the long run, Caleb advised. I haven't heard you offer any words of wisdom. My role here is simple. Keep them safe. I'll do whatever I have to do in order to do that. He paused as I looked him dead in the eyes and growled. That includes keeping safe from yourself. I didn't have to ask what the hunter meant. He was prepared to stop the Kierneys if necessary, if their agendas got in the way of their own survival. Couldn't argue with that. And it would need to be done if they got that far.
Don't even try.
Just promise me you'll give us a chance, I insisted. Mitchum nodded and shrugged. Can't talk any of you out of anything anyway, right? He got in the back of the driver's seat. Natalie was reviewing the radar, trying to get an idea of how close we were. I think once we get into those woods, we'll be inside the storm. The blonde said, shaking her charts again. The forest wasn't registering on the radar at all. The black hole that sucked in everything around it. The storm was likely holding everything within it as a prisoner. And given what Renee had to go through to break free, I was starting to get nervous about going in. Caleb turned the keys on and we drove towards it. Olivia gave me a weak smile. Paul was focusing on the changing landscape. It was hard to really explain what happened when we entered the storm. One minute we were just staring at the starry sky, and then we were engulfed in total blackness. The forest felt dead. It was still. Not a sound came from anything except our own engine. Everything felt trapped. The air was heavy. My body felt tense, like it was hard to breathe. Our instruments weren't working at all. Shit, this is creepier than I expected, Caleb admitted. We only got about a couple of miles in. The van died. What's wrong? Paul asked. Not sure. Something just killed all the power, Hunter responded. Kearney looked outside the van towards the quiet clearing that we were in. We're nearly there. The nest is close, I'm sure of it. We sat there in the dense forest for another moment, trying to get the nerve to step out. Mitchum was finally the one to decide to make a move and grabbed a few weapons before opening his door. Drones are probably off protecting their hive, he reasoned as he peered out towards the unknown. So deadly quiet. It gave me the chills. Then we heard something shuffling in the brush. Caleb aimed his guns to fire, but only a small squirrel ran across his feet.
God damn it.
He laughed nervously.
I don't want Japanese dub.
Told you.
Fuck that.
Nothing to worry about, he said with a wink. And then something much larger howled from the forest. Natalie gasped in terror as it reared up behind the hunter. It grabbed a hold of Caleb's upper body and pulled him into the woods. As soon as the creature disappeared from the tree line of Caleb, the forest was silent again. Olivia jumped out of her van, her eyes frantically scanning for any signs of life, as she called out his name. We need to move on foot and do it fast. They're probably taking him to the nest, her father insisted. I helped him out with gathering our gear in one place, making certain I had everything to enact his plan, along with that of his daughters. Caleb's sudden disappearance was enough to keep him distracted. He didn't really pay the extra bits of gear any attention. What the hell is happening? What do they want from us? Natalie screamed anxiously. That was a question that I knew we didn't have time to ask. So once we finished loading up our 2 backpacks, I helped Paul with his crutch and remarked, I know you want to do this yourself, and you've proven that you don't let your disability stop you, but this is going to be different. We're going to be up against monsters larger than life. I think I should echo the words you gave me when I first told you not to take this job, Paul quipped at me as he strapped the rifle to his back.
Mr. Beast.
We moved to the spot where Caleb was taken, and Olivia examined the ground, noting the displacement of brush and leaves, and using that to gauge which direction he was dragged in. They haven't killed him.
Oh my god, dead guy joined
Why
me.
haven't they killed him? She muttered as she saw little scratch marks on trees where Caleb had tried to hold on for dear life. Despite the fact that I had never particularly liked the hunter, I felt sorry for him. That was fate worse than death from what Paul and his daughter had described on the drive up. Olivia took the lead, following the small trail up to the mountains. The forest was dense here, and all of us did our best to stay close to one another. Even then, I felt disoriented and lost. There weren't any stars in the sky, just the continuous swirling mass of the storm. As we got closer, the displacement of the trail became more apparent, as though Caleb was fighting again and the creature was having a hard time. Unfortunately, these scuffles that caused marks on the surrounding foliage were making it difficult to determine which way to go. We paused at one of these when Natalie checked the atmospheric pressure using the small portable laptop that she had opted to bring. The readings were in the valley
and always will be, no matter what.
We climbed to the next ridge to look down towards it.
I don't have
My mouth is agape at the sight. From the heavens to the forest canopy was a massive
That was about the end of the stream, but
welcome to the greatest mag show of all time.
It had to be the largest tornado I had ever seen. It wasn't moving, so simply swirled identified. Scanners showed the speeds were reaching almost 130
Alpha is online.
per hour. The nest had to be inside.
Sword Art
How the hell are we
Online.
gonna go in that? Even get close, that was shreds.
But it's two greatest inventions.
Continue to destroy everything in the surrounding area.
I'm fucked
Thought for a
now.
moment. Those speeds, even these demons couldn't possibly get close to returning to the nest. That must mean they have another entry point. Perhaps underground tunnel of some sort, he suggested.
Everything
climbed down to the
engulfed
next
in
ridge.
flames.
Even at this distance, we could hear the howling of the winds. Natalie's eyes widened at his suggestion.
Ready?
And she said, "That's it. Yeah, I remember when I checked on the radar before the storm was here. I noticed there was an abandoned mine not too far. Network of caverns could do nicely for a colony of overgrown ants," Paul agreed. Hold on, I brought a few maps from
I
the
am the
van.
moonlight
I
that
tossed them
breaks
back
through the
carelessly,
darkness.
and one of the transponders I brought rolled out to the forest floor. Olivia froze as her father looked at it. "What's this?" Mr. Kearney asked, picking it up, then looking towards me for an explanation. His daughter opened her mouth to explain, but I had already conceived of a convincing lie. "When we get inside the nest, we're gonna need a distraction.
Motherfucker.
Destroy it.
Destroy.
Fine broadcasters the station will be perfect. The drones won't know what hit them. We could blow the place sky high." Paul looked at it thoughtfully before placing it back in the
Hope will find a way,
Good thinking, Dylan.
even when all is
Next
forlorn.
time, showed the class. We could have brought the rest, he said as I looked at the map.
I
Nervously
do
glanced
what
at
I
Olivia.
want to do.
She remained quiet as I spread out the chart to show the others. Do you remember what parts of the radar matched up with our road trip from Emerald Bay? Natalie studied the charts as Olivia focused on finding the trail
Oh
again.
shit.
And we moved south. The trees themselves shook violently with each step. It was like walking through a wind tunnel, even from the distance that we were at. "These might be the mines," Natalie suggested, passing the map back to me and pointing towards one of the landmarks. "But I'm afraid in here I can't make heads or tails of anything.
I'm a Canadian.
It's like a whole other world," she admitted, shivering as the cold finally
More
hit.
like a
I paused, remembering how the cold always seemed to imply that we were close to the storm, and looked towards several slopes that ran along a
Let's
river.
finish the story.
They were attracted to the cold. On a hunch, I followed the stream south, marking a few trees as I went. And that was when I saw the mine. And even more exciting, I saw a few of the drones flying inside. "Looks like we found one of the entry points," Paul said, patting my back in enthusiasm. How will we get inside? Olivia asked. I watched the drones come and go for a few minutes, noting their patterns, and said, looks like there's about a 90-second gap between them. We'll have to make it quick. With the howling winds at our backs and a timer counting down in my head, I grabbed Olivia's arm and all four of us moved as one. The stream of water trickled straight into the mine, and once inside, it wasn't difficult to guess which way to go. There was literally dozens of fresh bones scattered down the mine shaft, guiding our way. Most of them were animals. As we followed the dense, dark corridor, I gathered the creatures also used this place to dispose of other animals as well. This is like their sewage system, Natalie realized. As we came to a wide open area that had stairs leading up, most of it was covered in green, sticky goo. Dead skin. We didn't have time to be concerned about the aesthetics, and Caleb's life hung in the balance. The climb led us up and out to another mine shaft, where we saw hundreds of drones lining up to make their way towards a shining bright light. They seemed to pay no heed as we slowly moved onto the side of the corridor towards the illumination. The nest? Olivia guessed. Paul looked down the long, running tunnel, frowning as he realized something.
I think it may already be here, he said, as he gestured towards the rows and rows of cocoons. It looked like some sort of twisted nursery,
with dozens of fresh corpses being forced into the webbing by larger drones. They're drawn to the cold. It makes sense that an underground network like this would be ideal for them. The storm protects them from above. Without the right know-how, anyone who came close would be obliterated. Or worse, Olivia said as she covered her mouth and pointed toward a cocoon about 7 rows down.
Not a fan.
It's Caleb. He's still alive, she said excitedly.
Dylan, give me the charges. Natalie, I'll get to work setting them up along these passages. I think as long as we make no sudden moves, the colony won't view us as a threat here,
Paul said, gesturing towards the drones that were blindly following the light. I looked towards Olivia for confirmation. She nodded, and I passed it to him before following her down the webbing towards Caleb. How are we going to do this? There's literally hundreds of people here being prepared to change into those things. Can't save them all. I don't know yet, she admitted, as she took out a knife and began to cut away at the cocoon. The whole webbing vibrated as she did, and I nervously looked about, hoping none of the creatures would notice. As Caleb was freed from his trappings and gasped for air, she said, "This is a colony, right? She's got to be like some kind of queen. The one giving out all the commands. That's where we need to interrupt the signal." As Caleb kept coughing up blood, he pointed weakly towards the light that we saw above. But before I had a chance to look towards it, something in the caverns above stirred. It was a growl deeper than any creature I'd ever encountered before. And as I looked up to get a better view, I realized that was because it was at least twice as large as the massive entity we had encountered at Canyon. This one had giant legs like rose stems, with thorns poking at and driving into the tunnel walls, along with more than a dozen strange openings on its body, which resembled miniature mouths with rows and rows of gnashing teeth.
Pure instinct.
As I got closer, I saw the main body had dozens of dangling feelers, its blinding search for prey, and I grabbed at Olivia to get out of there. She refused to do so until I helped with Caleb as well. The creature's screams were so loud, I was sure the whole colony shook. There was no way to hide from its wrath. All the drones responded to its shrieks as we ran through the dark path. We moved to one of the massive chambers with more cocoons, like the one that Caleb had broken free of, which had tons of distributed webs as well. The hatchlings had woken. Now we found ourselves staring down the lifeless eyes of newly hatched monsters, half-turned from their old human bodies to eat us alive. I raised a gun to fire and told Olivia to get behind me. Then, the whole colony was down on top of us. There was no way we were going to live. I saw that from the moment we entered the room. The numbers were too great. I figured, though, that if I was going to die, the least I could do is see that Olivia and Caleb made it out alive.
Oh, no.
I could tell from the hunter's labored breathing that he wouldn't be able to help in the fight, so I shot as closest to the drones and then shoved them both towards the side corridor of the labyrinth. "I'll hold them off," I told the two of them as I gritted my teeth and watched the massive throng of beasts breathe down on me. Honestly, it would have been over in just a few seconds, but I didn't count on the explosions. A set of detonations shook the tunnel, ricocheting rocks and debris towards the horde. At first, I was sure the blast would not be enough to make a difference. And then in front of me, the floor to this level of the mine simply collapsed. More rock, dirt, mud, and debris fell to block the monsters from reaching me as I heard a voice shout from above. "Don't just stand there like an idiot, Dylan. Run while you still got a chance."
Oh, what the fuck?
I figured he had set the explosions up, but the timing was wrong. He had decided to come to our rescue instead of focusing on his main task. But now with the new devastation that rocked the mine, any stragglers connected to the colony were coming out of the woodwork. There wouldn't be enough time to enact Olivia's plan. We still didn't even know how to reach the core. Part of me wondered as I ran if Paul had suspected what we were up to. No. As he began to climb away from the upset colony, I realized his main concern had actually been our safety. I pushed to where Olivia was at, keeping an eye on all the surrounding tunnels as I heard the shrieking growl nearer. Caleb was having a hard time even standing up. "He's choking," I realized. He gestured towards one of the packs where he had brought a few simple hunting knives. When Olivia passed one, we both watched as he stabbed himself near his ribcage, and a burst of black slime spewed out into the floor of the tunnel. At the same time, his breathing returned, and Caleb said, "Spiders. Goddamn, why did it have to be spiders?" I looked at the ooze that had suffocated him and watched as hundreds of miniature spiders hatched from slime, shrieking and trying to find their host again. "There's no end to them," Olivia said, pulling Caleb away and checking his wound. "You should have told your dad what we were doing. At this rate, the way that he's going, he's going to get buried alive," I told her. The hunter ripped off part of his shirt to patch up the wound, wincing as he stopped the bleeding and limping down the tunnel. "It's a temporary fix. The big one above is like some sort of surrogate womb for the queen. He's holding the eggs that we gathered, but it wouldn't be the source. Gotta get to the core if we want to do any real damage," the hunter explained as we made our way back to the main corridor. I spotted Natalie and Paul setting up more charges above us and called out to them. The monsters were working as fast as possible to bridge the gap using their own bodies as stepping stones. It reminded me of the way their flesh and bone had mixed together during their attacks at the station. "Dad!" Olivia said, covering her mouth in shock as the creatures moved closer. "We need to send out the signal now." "No, we'll ruin any chance we have of finding my mom," Olivia stuttered. I shook my head and pointed above. "If we do nothing, your dad is going to die." She bit her lip.
It's already over.
And nodded. Tossing the backpack down, she took out the supplies necessary for creating a small receiver, and Caleb and I watched the perimeter. A few of the stronger soldiers were searching for us. I passed Caleb his gun back and muttered, "Are you sure you can handle this?" He sneered. "You're going soft on me through it. It's not your style." Then he cocked his gun and pointed it towards the wide-mouthed opening. "Let's give him hell." We rained down what ammunition we had on the first wave, sending the beasts flailing backwards as Olivia worked as quickly as she could. "If you could speed this up, I think we would appreciate it," I said, kicking away at another drone. They were going to overpower us in a matter of seconds. A sharp burst of noise echoed in response. She had done it. The monsters collapsed in fury as Olivia stood up and said, "This isn't nearly enough to bring the whole thing to its knees, but it should buy us some time. Come on." Caleb kicked away another drone that writhed as we ran up the next mine shaft to the upper levels. The light that we had seen was growing brighter and brighter, but Paul and Nat were nowhere to be seen. What if we were too late? Ahead of me, Olivia's eyes caught sight of something and she froze, causing me and Caleb to nearly run into her. I was about to berate her for being clumsy when I saw it for myself.
"Oh no.
What in the hell
I died
is that?"
from multiple attacks.
Caleb said as we stepped into some sort of antechamber. The entire structure of the room didn't resemble any of the rest of the mine. Because instead of the usual rocks and gravel that held up the tunnel, we saw nothing but rows and rows of thick vines and webbing. It looked like skin. The walls themselves were moving and throbbing the way a heart would when pumping blood, and with each resonance that passed through the veins, long streaks of light flowed in and out. These same streams of light were moving towards the central part of the wall, a canvas of urchin-like nodes that all interconnected and vibrated together. This was the core. Of that I knew there was no doubt. But then, from the urchins of sinew and flesh, we saw something that began to form. Each one of the nodes had the structure of a face, but without eyes or nose.
That is the most
One by
powerful
one, they
weapon.
transformed, their neutral gray faces forming a massive wall. Then there was a newly formed mouthpiece, and their voices echoed through the chamber, shaking us all to the bone. We are Storm. We were listening to the sound of corpses making a chorus of unholy noise. Olivia stood closer. Somehow she was able to shake the bizarreness of this encounter and asked a question. What is this place? Between this.
God damn, that's a lot of damage. Fuck
like
that.
between life and death?
Oh,
Caleb asked as he stood alongside Olivia. Everything. Nothing. Chaos. Order. How is it even communicating with us? Olivia asked. Same way as the drones. They remember what it was like to be human. Mimic. It's all a mimicry.
Oh, God.
Why? Why is this happening? What do you want? They shifted, their sliding flesh twisting and reforming to grow a larger amalgamation of their neutral faces. Grow. Spread. Renew. Become. Everything they learned is remembered. Look at this place. It's a network. It's unnatural, Caleb said, gesturing towards the streaming lights. As I stared at it, I realized he was right. But how? There's no way it could travel so far, even with the storm. I heard a rifle cock, and all of us looked towards the other entrance to see Paul standing there, blood dripping down his face, as he took aim at the massive creature. Because this ain't the only one, he declared. What? You saying there's more of this nastiness out there? Caleb said, his words echoing in the chamber almost endlessly. See for yourself. This nest is small, strong to be sure. It's like the tip of the iceberg. Everything here is new growth, desperate to expand, choke everything in its path. The shrieks of the colony grew louder from behind him, and he gestured towards the way that he had come. We were fools to never come here. You need to leave before it's too late. Olivia started to object and show him the receiver that she had built. And I saw the seriousness of Paul's face. You knew we'd try to set up a broadcast. I knew you'd fail. You've had your fun. It's time to kill these sons of bitches.
Okay.
Olivia stared at the skin map. Her eyes filled with wonder and excitement. God, don't you see? This confirms everything. The storm keeps them alive. Mom, she's still out there. Wake up, girl. It's over for her. How can you say that? I can't let you throw your life away the way I have, Olivia. It shone in the unnatural light of the room, and I immediately realized what it was. He's got a bomb. Natalie backed away nervously, but I realized it was about the wreck of C4, enough to probably devastate this entire colony. Dad, don't do this. Has this always been a suicide mission for you? Caleb asked in irritation. Paul's determined eyes stayed on his daughter. Once this place is gone, we can be free. Storm will be gone. But you just said yourself there's others out there. This accomplishes nothing. The monsters are pushing their way into the room. Only the broadcast is slowing them down. From the eastern wall, the faces formed a larger cohesive frame. A body. It stepped out from the wall, still fresh and new. Tied to the surface of the core with vines that I guessed acted as an umbilical cord. And then the body opened its new eyes and stared towards all of us with mild fascination. Paul's face alone told me it was someone he recognized. His wife. Renee. He said softly as he stared at the creature in amazement. She's alive? Caleb asked. He didn't want to believe it, and neither did I. I am.
God damn it. Okay.
This isn't your wife. I am what comes next. For all. She gestured towards the
I
bomb
will
that Paul
block your
held,
way.
ready to destroy
You
everyone
cannot.
and everything.
You cannot.
I did not realize this was inevitable. Nature would always take its course. She asked in a most soothing, sickly voice. I looked towards Paul, the screeching corpses that were desperately trying to overcome the signal, and then I understood. This was a trap. This is a trap all along. It views us as a threat. Because of the broadcast, it is us. Humans always defeated nature. Vinny's body responded coldly. Paul shook his head, staring towards his daughter. No. No, I won't let that happen, Olivia. Listen to me. No matter what you think, this thing's not your mother. You have to leave this place. Protect the station. Protect all of us. Dad, don't, he said. It was too late. He pressed the detonator and flung himself towards the core. The nest collapsed. I found myself free-falling, scrambling to grab a hold of anything solid as the mine tumbled in on itself. When I hit the ground, every ounce of my energy was pushed out of me. I don't know for how long I laid there, but when I did have the strength to move around, the place had dissolved into madness. The creatures were skittering everywhere about the walls, confused like a ship with no compass. I realized as I watched that it had to mean the last detonators Paul had made were a success. At the core of this vile place was gone for good. I heard a grunt not far off and saw Caleb push aside some of the debris to get to me. His whole face was covered in a smear of blood and soot. Can you walk, Dylan? You need to get out of here, he said. I nodded weakly and looked up as the thrashing sounds of the monster turning on each other grew louder. It would not be long before all of them had killed one another. We made it through a portion of the mine shaft that was still intact, and Caleb took out his only weapon left, barely aiming it towards the next turn as we heard someone approach. Natalie! Olivia! I called out as the two girls reunited with us in the dark tunnel. Both of them gave the faintest of smiles under the circumstances, and we all knew there was still a long way to go before we were out of this. Though I guessed that Olivia would want to mourn her father's passing, now's not the time. Caleb and I took the lead as we all pushed through the debris to find our way out. We were as careful as we could be, knowing that one false move could cause more of the place to collapse. We had been going at it for almost 30 minutes when I heard the familiar rush of air from somewhere above us. The surface! We're almost there, said it. We began to climb as rain hit the edges of the opening. I flinched, expecting to find the same scorching storm that we had fought for so long. But instead, I was surprised to see this didn't hurt us at all. Had the destruction of the core allowed nature to return to some sense of order. I couldn't pause to think about it rationally because each passing moment, the wailing of the creatures became louder. They were tearing apart anything that came in contact with them. With each knock of the ladder, the entire nest shook and collapsed more and more, widening until at last we were out. The four of us caught our breath, and there on the edge of the mine, the raging wind and storm that protected us now was nothing but a few gusts.
Okay.
Above us, though, lightning began to crack and burn across the sky. A few bolts struck near the open maw of the pit that we just climbed out of, and I heard the roar of the monsters. We need to get to the van. Now. Caleb pulled Olivia up, and we felt the dirt beneath us begin to shake from the blasts of plasma that struck barely 20 feet away. The rest of the abandoned mine became a sinkhole quickly, pulling trees and other debris nearby into the abyss. I looked down at the angry creatures, their frenzy becoming more and more concentrated with each movement. They were opening their mouths wider and wider, over top of each other, teeth scraping against sinews that formed the larger units. They reminded me of the horrific creatures that we had seen attack us at the main station. But this was 10,000 times bigger. The menagerie of flesh and teeth climbing towards us with rapid ferocity. I scrambled to my feet and ran. The wind howled as we pushed through the woods. The whole sky was growing darker as the monsters rose. It had to be the size of a building, roaring to life as it pursued us. Do we have any explosives in the van? I screamed. Olivia nodded furiously as we ran with all of our might. Caleb pulled out the keys and tossed them to me as we got closer. I pulled open the door and revved the engine as the creature towered over us. Caleb grabbed one of the rifles and started to fire at his chest. Dozens of the smaller beasts fell to the ground screaming as I shifted to first gear. Natalie opened up one of the floor compartments and took out the last of the C4. Light it up, Olivia told her, as a massive body of flesh crashed through the trees. I swerved towards the open highway as the storm crashed against the sky, louder and louder. I thought that we weren't going to make it. Then when Caleb grabbed the explosive and chunked him straight towards the maw of the hideous beast, the heavens were aflame. The shower of blood and fire. Our van shook and tumbled across the ferry, barely staying on all four wheels as the monster gave out with one final scream. The door burned and torn apart, the clouds cleared, and the quiet returned to the sky. I slowed down and looked in the rearview mirror. The bodies of the monsters burning to ash on the highway as I finally caught my breath. It was over. Even though we were in the clear, the drive back to Emerald Bay was laced with sadness. With the back door of the van gone, I could see Olivia hanging her feet over the back bumper, watching the horizon fade away. We had lost everything. And I felt responsible for this because of the foolish plan that I had concocted. I resolved when we got back to the station that I would talk to her about it. Driving into town felt so different than it had the first time when I caught the bus. It felt like a ghost town then, and ready to describe was nothing short of complete abandonment. There were no signs of any life, even in the diner or the
two
hotel.
deaths right now.
The people that had come with the storm had rolled out just as quickly. Once back at KTHU, Natalie helped me unload the van, and I watched Olivia tiredly climb out and announce that she was going to bed. Can't imagine what she's going through. Nat gave me a sigh. I can't. It's the worst feeling in the world.
Kindness.
I finished setting things away and wiping sweat from my brow, exhausted from the long run that we had returned from. It felt like the first time in ages that I'd actually gotten a chance to rest.
I would rather betray the world
than
the world.
Over Emerald Bay, and I found Olivia in the break room making coffee. Anyway, it was time for me to
Kindness is
set
the
things straight.
surest path to ruination.
Hey. Her eyes drifted towards me,
I already have
and I
10
muttered,
rounds. Fuck.
I was wondering, really, if you wanted to have a memorial service for your father. Olivia nodded absently. She finished what she was doing, but then she said something that surprised me. He's not dead. Olivia. He's part of the storm now. I guess part of the larger one, anyway. Another cog in a greater machine, she said, as she walked towards the control room. You think the storm changed him? The right word's probably assimilated. You were right, Dylan. The whole thing was always a trap. The storm wanted us to come for it. I mean, it took advantage of your father's greed so it could discover everything about KTHU. I believe so.
Destroy.
Which means you have a lot more work ahead of us, she said, as she started to switch on the consoles and check Doppler. Caleb was already there, as he fixed some of the older breakers and muttering, "And here I thought we were gonna get a holiday." So, it was for nothing, I lamented. Dylan, aren't you listening? My father's alive, and my mother too. I would call that discovery a win. It means these last 3 years weren't in vain, Olivia said. But we don't know if we can even save them, or any of the other people that have been changed by this force of nature. That's a battle we fight another day. We got time to lick our wounds and prepare. The storm's gone for now. He'll be back. Before I got a chance to ask another question, the door behind us swung open, and Natalie came in holding several thick yellow envelopes. I found these near the front door. Looks like the runs keep coming, even while we were away. She commented, passing the package to Olivia. What's destroy? She responded by opening up one of them and tossing me a bundle of cash. Her eyes widened in surprise, and Caleb laughed. Payday, Pruitt. Or do you think we did this for nothing? The hunter asked. I looked at the bundle of bills and said, wait, what? Where does all this come from? I don't know. Dad didn't know either. Just shows up every week. We use the funds to keep the station running and our bodies warm and well fed. Olivia responded as we counted it all up. And you never see who delivers it. I mean, it's an anonymous drop, Natalie said with a shrug. I guess that answers one question. Yeah, Channel 46 is full of surprises. Caleb laughed as he yawned and added, I'm headed to the bunker to get some sleep. And as he left, I turned to Olivia to comment, seems like every time I learn something, there's more to ask. You get used to it, she said dryly. Generators need a chance to recharge, and we're gonna need to start testing different frequencies out. Might need more power, she muttered, as she started to get to work. I set the money down and offered to help. I don't think we can get this all done alone, Olivia admitted. Natalie was watching from the steps. I could run another ad. Maybe we could scrounge up some help. I reflected on the past week or so. All the things I had seen and experienced as a matter of this crew. It's not a bad idea, Olivia agreed. Okay, what do you think it should say? Neither of them seemed to know for sure, so I offered up a suggestion. Seeking help at Channel 46 for unique storm chasing. I paused and gave them both an awkward smirk. Some experience required. Hey guys, it's still hot out. Like, unreasonably hot out. And you know what's great when it's unreasonably hot out? Iced tea. So if you guys like iced tea, check out Ivory Monocle Tea. It's my wife's loose leaf tea thing she does on Etsy. Etsy.com/shop/Ivory Monocle Tea. You can get a whole bunch of different kinds of teas on there. They could be made hot if you're insane, or they could be made cold if you live anywhere near the equator. So check out Etsy.com/shop/Ivory Monocle Tea, and you can get a whole bunch of different kinds of teas, from the fruity kind to the caffeinated kind to the kind that's named after creepypasta things, even one that's named after me, My Dark and Stormy Night. And if you ask, when you order that tea, you can get a little MCP dabbing sticker along with it. Oh, also, I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but I sign all the cards if they're like horror-related teas. So if you ever wanted that, check that out. That's the only place you can get it now. So yeah, check it out. Etsy.com/shop/Ivory Monocle Tea. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. Thank you so much. A very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Reaper61167, Bobby Carmen, Tristan Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Krause, Vicky McQuickie, Sam High, Crusader Chocobo, Spooky Shell, Adam Morris, Grand Moth the Milky, Big Smoke 369, Captain Scurvy, Salty Irish Poet, Esteban, Braden Morris, Nick Hull, Horror Fan 1212, Hour Minute Second Time, Kyle Resnack, David Martin, Scarrington the Unkempt, Robert Malcolm, Angela, Spanky, Snoochie Boochie, Seclude, Lupina Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Tyler Fletcher, Merxenum, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier the Cheyenne, Denix, Sean Catabaker, 6K
Generally, YouTubers are seen as fun-loving entertainers with a passion for a specific niche in content. Many look up to these entertainers as inspirational role models. But what if I told you that even a fun-loving place like YouTube has a dark side? What if I told you that even the most family-friendly, light-hearted YouTubers potentially have a dark secret? Welcome to the dark side of YouTube. I am your host, Autumn Ivy, and with this series, my team and I will be taking the deepest dives into the darkest and most disturbing corners of YouTube. These are the stories YouTube doesn't want you to know about. From the creators of the...
For the rest of my short life? Well, I'd estimate that there's about a 90% chance I'm going to die by the end of the day. And even if I do make it out of this fiasco, my life's never really going to be the same. So fuck it. Here we go.
Hey, can you choose?
My day started out more or less normal. I was part of the unit guarding somebody named Jim Henninger. Well, that was his real name. Doesn't invoke a lot of fear, does it? That's why we had to call him something else. Since he used to be some psycho-surgeon or something, we dubbed him the Surgeon. Really creative stuff, I know. Standing at 5'7", 135 pounds, we were all required to memorize their physical stats. He doesn't look like much. However, if you ever find yourself in the same room with him, no matter how big and tough you are, you're getting dissected or something. The main danger surrounding him stems from the fact that he seems to be able to teleport on will. What? Only to end up breathing right back down your neck. And for that reason, there's got to be at least 10 sets of eyes on his monitor at all times. There's no way around it.
Where did it go?
He's not being watched.
Nowhere.
He will escape. He's also kind of unkillable.
Oh yeah, I'm blind.
No matter how many bullets you put through his head or... Oh boy.